Well, good evening and welcome to East Hampton School Committee meeting. Tonight's meeting is being recorded by East Hampton Public Access Cable TV. So if you miss anything, you can catch it later. And we would like to thank Kathy, who is recording for us this evening. And also, if you are interested in volunteering with the cable access station, channels 5, 19, and 20, they are always looking for volunteers, and you may call Kathy at 413-203-1360 and let her know that you are interested. The first part of our meeting tonight is devoted to the proposed budget.
Yes, the announcements first.
I'm sorry, I thought they came here. I have the agenda as the regular session.
I'm sorry.
We'll get to it. Okay. But the first part of our meeting tonight is devoted to a discussion of the proposed budget for the school, East Hampton schools, and for 2014. So first, I think most of you know that we do welcome tonight public speak, which means that we will welcome your questions and comments concerning the budget. But before we get to you, certainly I think it's important that we hear from our superintendent, Nancy Folensby, so that we will know exactly what is being proposed in this budget. Nancy.
Thank you, Nancy. And what I'm going to do is walk everyone through the budget book, the school committee members, and then following that, there will be a PowerPoint presentation that will summarize the main points of the budget. So you don't have the budget book in front of you, all of you, but there will be a PowerPoint that will capture what's strategic and important about the budget. So although, I want to start by saying that although more than one pair of eyes looked at these documents before publishing, school committee, a few errors were missed, and you have the corrected pages on top of your packet. On page 3, the fiscal year 2012 and the second line of the second paragraph has been changed to FY 2013. And on page 7, there have been a few changes in the grant information, which I'm going to ask Shirley Gilfeather, our grants manager and curriculum director, to talk about when we get to that point in the budget book. So, I'm sorry?
That was page 7?
Page 7, yes.
Thank you.
So I'm going to start by just walking through the budget book, and the introduction of the budget in section 1 opens with the East Hampton Public Schools mission and core values and the district's strategic plan, a plan developed with community participation 3 years ago. This budget was planned with the greatest degree of alignment possible to the mission and strategic plan given the fiscal challenges we recognize exist. In my executive summary, I talk about the budget that I'm recommending to the school committee, and it is a budget of $17,386,999, which represents an increase of 2% from the FY 2013 school committee's adopted budget. Of this amount, $15,614,811 is being requested from the city. The proposed budget represents our most current estimate of available funding sources, including the use of all FY 2013 choice funds. These are funds that we have in a revolving account that come from tuitions paid by students' families who choice into our district. The recommended budget represents a level service budget. A level service budget would require no cuts in positions or services currently provided to the students in East Hampton, but it would not allow for any additional positions in the budget. The second section of the budget addresses funding our district receives from grants. pages 4 through 6 list all the grants we receive and a description of each. All of these grants, with the exception of the grants we receive from the Early Learning Foundation, ELF, come from the state. As you can see on page 7, grant funds available to the district have decreased. But I'm going to ask Shirley Gilfeather, our grants manager and curriculum director, to come up and give a little overview of page 7. Shirley? Yeah, I was looking for you in the audience. If you'd come to the podium, Shirley.
Good evening, everyone. You know, at Thanksgiving every year, in whatever fashion, we all kind of bow our heads and we're thankful for certain things over the years. So I'm going to ask you in a way to kind of bow your heads right now and say a little silent thank you for us getting grants. Because if we weren't getting grants, the story of East Hampton Public Schools would be a real tragedy. And so I want to point out to you what's on this page and what it represents. But I also want to point out some pieces that I think you need to keep in mind as you look at this budget and look ahead even to next year's budget. So first of all, to explain, we've broken this down into 4 categories: special education grants, entitlement grants, which are federal grants that make their way into the state and then down to the school districts, competitive grants, which is an indication of us continuing to always go out and find funding wherever we can find it. So those are ones we have to search for, those are ones we have to write for, and we are not entitled to. They are competitive for us to get. There's not a lot of those around anymore for a lot of reasons that we know economically. And then the last category are other things, other grants that are a little bit more anomalies that don't fit into those first 3 categories. Each of those category areas is summarized for the year in terms of the current funding for that year, the increase or decrease over the previous year, and then the percent of increase or decrease. And what you can see is in most cases, the trend has certainly been somewhat downward. But the anomalies that I want to really highlight to you is in the 3rd area, which is the competitive grants. First of all, Grant 201 is a grant referred to as Race to the Top. Some of you may have heard that mentioned in news reports that you see on the television. Race to the Top is federal funding that came down. It was an option for districts to participate in Race to the Top. It was a relatively rigorous grant funding process. And in the Race to the Top, we were one of the districts that decided to go for that competitively and receive that funding. The first year of Race to the Top is listed there. It was fiscal year 11 or school year 10-11. And what this district got was $266,997. That's not chump change for this district, okay? And then what that is it's a 4-year grant. So each year you spend a certain amount of it. In the first year we spent $34,998. Last year we didn't spend as much of that grant, okay? Last year was my first year here. We were getting our feet on the ground. We were trying to decide some initiatives with our new strategic plan and a variety of other things. So we didn't spend quite as much last year. We anticipate spending considerably more this year and the bulk of the funds next year. But next year will be the last year of that grant. And a lot of the things we've been spending that money on have been keeping a lot of the quality programs and activities in this district afloat. And so when that federal funding goes away and that $227,000 we have this year dwindles down next year by some 120 that we'll spend this year, we'll have another 100 and some next year, and then we'll have nothing. So it's something we need to keep in mind about the gift of grants and the curse of grants. The other piece I want to point out to you is also in that same competitive grant area, and that's Grant 206. In 2010-11, some of you remember that we had ERA money, okay, the Recovery Act money. And so that brought in $471,948 to this district in 1 year. That offset an awful lot of expenses that year, and then it went away. So you see that money in there, and you see for that particular line, okay, in fact, for all of those, Race to the Top was new in 10-11. The Education Jobs Grant, as it was called, was new. So there was no way to tell a percentage because basically there was nothing prior years. That was a 1-year windfall, and it's now gone. Okay. So those anomalies are just things that I think you need to be aware of in terms of grant funding. And if you look at the very bottom, you get kind of the summary of this document. Even though my suggestion to you is if you really want to see the read of information, it's best to take each grant and read it across the line to get the best picture, or to take the special ed grants and look at them in totality. Because that competitive grant line with Race to the Top, and even that 1 year of the ERA money, throws off the bottom a little bit. But let me explain that last line, that net funding line. In fiscal 10-11, that year that we got Race to the Top for the first time and ERA money, that brought into the district $1,798,827. Again, not chump change in that 1 year, to offset a lot of the things that a local budget was starting to, it's not that we were supplanting, take that right off the record, but it was allowing us to do some activities in this district that otherwise with local funds we would not have been able to do. In the next year, that amount became 1,400 plus, and this year is 1,200,000 plus, and next year it will be decreasing even more. And then once that Race to the Top goes away, and as you can see in the entitlement grants, those keep going down. Usually each year we had a little anomaly in 11-12. The feds gave us a little bit, but basically the trend for the entitlement grants has been to be going down as well. So the picture in the future for our grants is not going to look as it has been 3-4 years ago. The trend is definitely going down. And again, I just want to emphasize that the reason that that's important to our discussion tonight is to say to you, grant funding has been allowing us to do additional math tutoring at the middle school, for example, okay? It's kept us alive with Title I, reading recovery, and a variety of the literacy initiatives at the elementary school. When these funds begin to decrease, we begin to lose staff, we begin to lose programs. So the significance of this page on grants is critical to the discussion about local budgeting. Are there any questions on the page?
School committee.
School committee?
Very well explained. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Yes.
I do have a question.
Sure.
Do you think that, am I hearing you say that you don't envision that new opportunities for new grants will surface in the next couple of years either? Do you see this as a general trend that these things are just drying up and that it's not likely that something like Race to the Top will come to life again when Race to the Top is done?
That's
prediction?
yeah, my prediction based upon the fiscal issues in the federal government right now and how they're playing out. I can't see a consensus on the part of Congress or the willingness to think about new funding for something as these begin to dry up. So will there be small grants here and small grants there? Yes, I think there'll certainly be that, but nothing like we've seen, I don't think, in the Race to the Top. Nothing of that nature.
Thank you, Cheryl. So we're going to move on to Section 3 of the budget book. And Section 3 contains information on student enrollment. Page 8 shows that enrollment is increasing and shows average class size. You can see the average class size for this school year, which is between 20 and 25, according to this chart. And due to cuts in teaching positions, creating some grade levels with 5 classrooms and some with 6, we must shift our teachers from grade level to grade level to create an appropriate teacher-student ratio. This year we had several grade levels, especially in our elementary schools, that were not of optimum size. It is important to recognize that the average class size numbers are just that and are based on October figures. During the school year, students move into the district, and in reality, the student-teacher ratios in some classrooms are already larger than we would want, particularly in our third grades. That would be a good example of that. The next chart show school choice in and school choice out, and I'm going to be talking about this, as is Andy Paquette, our business management consultant, with a PowerPoint at the end of this walkthrough of the budget book, so you'll all have some more information on that visible to you. So this shows charts about choice in and school choice out and charter enrollment. Choice in numbers are not actuals yet, but are projected to be down by 3 students. Choice out numbers are projected to be up by 11 students. In choice out numbers, there are often families who move multiple children to other schools, and this may impact our numbers. With choice in, our numbers are limited by the spaces we have available at each grade level. The larger our class sizes are, the fewer students we can take in through the school choice program, as we want to protect good class sizes for our East Hampton students. $5,000 of tuition leaves our district with every student who chooses to go to school in another district. And $5,000 in tuition is received by our district for every student who chooses to choice into our district through the school choice program. Charter school enrollment is also up by 7 students. Charter schools offer very specialized programs and curriculum not available in most public schools. The majority of students who leave East Hampton for a charter school choose to attend the Lower Pioneer Valley Performing Arts School, and the second largest number choose to attend the Chinese Immersion School in Hadley. Charter tuition is $10,000 per pupil, with some reimbursement from the state. Let's look at section 4 now.
Nancy, can I
Yes,
ask you real
yes,
quick?
any questions? Please stop me if you have questions.
Do you
School
have
committee
a,
members.
do you have a projection for next year for charter school to up or down?
Up. Yes, up. That's what we were just talking about, and that's what it shows you.
By 7?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. Those are projections, and we won't know for sure until the end of the year, beginning of next year. Other questions on that section?
Well, just to clarify, those projections become, in fact, the real number for budgeting purposes because they're a part of the state's cherry sheet.
That's
And
right.
so the Department of Revenue in the fall, when we set the tax rate, uses those projections as real numbers.
Mhm.
They are ultimately changed most of the time because of the third payment in the
Right.
year. But the budget stuff never reflects that, and the state never reflects that in their funding cycle.
Any other questions on that? Okay, we'll move on to section 4. Section 4 gives a budget overview, and I will address this overview in the PowerPoint following this walkthrough of the budget book. So page 14 shows the expense history of the district over the last 4 years and the proposed budget for FY 2014. Rises in costs and administration, which also include legal fees, are due for the most part to increases in special education legal fees and contract obligations. An increase in instructional costs in FY 2013 is due primarily to contract obligations and projected for FY 14. The budget history on page 15 shows the local appropriation from the city on the school side. There are school-related expenses on the city side as well, such as insurance, choice out, and charter tuitions. And you can see the history over time. On pages 16 through 19, we've included these pages to show the increase in unfunded mandates school districts in Massachusetts face. This document was developed by the Management Solution Incorporated, the company owned by Andy Paquette, our business management consultant. And it was adopted from an analysis done by the Taunton schools using, and Andy used East Hampton financial information as he created this document. So for the audience, the initiatives and unfunded mandates that are listed here are the Mass Common Core, the Educator Evaluation System. Mass Common Core estimated cost to the district is $360,452. The Educator Evaluation System that we're beginning to implement now, $295,333. Partnership of Assessment for Readiness of College and Careers, PARC. These are the new assessments that the state is putting into place and requiring us to use. Approximately $225,000 for technology, infrastructure, new computer upgrades for testing, software upgrades, and professional development. For the other two, the costs are primarily for text and professional development to implement those systems. Yes.
Just for informational purposes, these unfunded mandates also apply to charter schools?
No, they don't. Not all
So
of them.
charter schools do not have to follow these state.
I'm sorry. The private schools do not. Charter schools, as yes, they do.
They do?
Right.
Okay.
Because they are public schools.
All right.
Right. Rethinking Equity and Teaching for English Language Learners, called RETEL. This is a new approach designed to transform the teaching of English language learners. All very good initiatives. Will cost the district approximately $10,500, and that would include a 48-hour course at contract rate of pay, 6 hours of administrator training, and 10 hours training for those formerly trained. So we have implemented a whole training program for ELL teachers and to provide adequate education for ELL learners. But the state discovered that the requirements were not adequate, and so they had to revise it, and now we've brought the RETEL in, and we have to retrain everyone and train all new teachers. World-class Instructional Design and Assessment, WIDA. This is being used widely over 20 states, and the hope is that it will provide Massachusetts with a more comprehensive understanding about its students' academic language learning across content areas. Again, support for our English language learners. The cost approximately $94,884. Professional development, new materials, and resources. And assessing comprehension and communication in English state-to-state access. This is also an assessment tool being implemented across the state. The cost to implement it in our district is approximately $36,482, which would include training for testing, new materials, and resources. These are all estimates, but the total estimated cost to our district is a little bit over $1 million, which is not funded. Moving on to page 20. Page 20 shows our level service request to the city, which is $15,614,811, as well as the local appropriation for a level funded budget of $15,005,400, which is our current funding from the city. And the gap between the two, which is $609,412. So recognizing that the city may not have enough funds for a level service appropriation, district administrators and the leadership team were given an assignment to examine their budgets line by line to look for places where money could be saved. They were asked to come up with a 3% decrease to their current budgets. Now the difference, the increase from our current budget to the level service budget is 2%, but at the time we began this process, it looked like we were going to have a gap that would equal 3% to their budgets. This was based on discussions at leadership team meetings, and they began with what administrators brought forth, and the impact on the educational program. So we had discussions in leadership team, administrators brought forth what a 3% cut would look like at each building level, and we began to have discussions about what those cuts would mean to our educational program. As the discussions continued, the impact of the reductions was examined from a district perspective. So each administrator was looking at it from his or her building perspective, and then we had to look at it across the district in terms of, you know, where could we make cuts that would have the least possible further negative impact on the budget. And the draft document contained in this proposal looks at that. All administrators were in agreement. We had a first go-round, and some of their 3% reductions included staff members. And as we began our district discussions, all of our administrators agreed that the staff position should be removed from the proposal due to their negative impact on the educational program we can provide the students of East Hampton, and due to the fact that those cuts to staff would come on top of a number of cuts that we've made already, and I will outline those in the PowerPoint. You will note that in this draft there appear to be more cuts at the high school and middle school levels. But if you look at the next pages, which are a history of cuts made over the last 4 years, you will see that the elementary schools suffered the largest losses of staff last year, and each year different levels are cut depending on where the needs are greatest and where we think that we can make those cuts without a tremendous negative impact to our educational program. And again, I will go into this at the PowerPoint time. I'm going to ask Andy Paquette to come to the podium now to talk about the budget pages. And before he does that, were there any questions on those?
Could you just perhaps reiterate again the level service versus level funding?
Level
Just to clarify
service-
that.
Yes, thank you, Lori. Level service means that we would have all of the current staff that we currently have in place and our budget line items for supplies, materials, and exactly the budget that exactly everything that we have in our district now, we would have under a level service budget. We would not be able to add any of the positions that we have had to cut in the past. And there are other positions that we need. You know, we very much need a world language teacher at the middle school. You know, we very much need another custodian in the district. We very much need more teachers at the elementary level and the middle school level to maintain class sizes, as well as a number of other positions that we'd like to put back into place. But recognizing that these are difficult economic times, we are proposing and strongly recommending that we do not receive anything less than a level service budget, so that we have at least what we have currently, so we can maintain that quality of the educational program in the East Hampton schools. A level funded budget means a cut in what we currently have of approximately $600,000. And we would have to find ways to cut $600,000. The average cost or price that we use when we figure out a teaching position is $50,000. So you can see from that how many teaching positions would have to be cut, given that in our first draft, without taking out the positions, we have reductions of $282,245, only close to $300,000. So, you know, another $300,000 would require a number of cuts to teaching positions, because that's really where the funding is greatest. That help?
Thank you, yes.
Peter?
Is that $50,000 number, though, is a conservative number, because that's really premised off someone fairly early in their career.
Well, you know, we use that number because it is sort of an average of teachers that we might hire who are early in their career.
Right.
We're a much lower pay scale with teachers who are at master's level.
Right.
So we use that as a calculation number.
Right.
But it
I guess.
could be higher. Could
Yeah.
be lower.
I mean, I think that the even if the number of sort of what the term FTE, even if that changes, it only changes because it would mean removing a more experienced and better qualified educator. So this is really the most sort of conservative, I think, estimate in terms of the total impact.
Yes, I would say so. Andy, do you want to go through
Sure.
the budget
Okay,
pages now?
section 5.
Section
Yes.
5.
What you have is based on, after discussions with the committee and workshop sessions and finance subcommittee, this is the detail of the budget and a sort of the number side of the charts that are in the budget booklet. But if you look and see from our FY14 budget, the first page of the master is the all funds and also the funding sources that we plan on using, with a description as to what those funding sources are, where they're from, and what they're used for. So we have the school choice, circuit breaker, our other revolving accounts, federal and state grants, and then the local appropriation request. You can see, if you were to share for the public, we are looking at a decrease in our from 13 to 14 as far as our availability of the other funding sources, primarily to the tune of just about $350,000, with a minor increase in the other revolving accounts of $20,000. So there'll be another slide to show the sort of the history of those other funding sources we have available. The next page is the proposal. What we've decided to do to sort of show by the Department of Education, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, their function codes. Those are the category of expenses that we categorize all the expenses related to providing education here in East Hampton. We've depicted the funding sources and then how it is that we're using those funding sources by each DESE function code. So you have a reiteration of the funding sources, and then the breakdown of the DESE function codes 1002, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 9000, to give you an idea of the breakdown of what that just under $17.4 million represent. We also included history from FY10 to FY13, FY10 to 12 of actual city charges, and the FY13 budgeted city charges. These are from the end of the year financial report that we get from the mayor and finance director's office regarding how the expenses on the city side of the ledger devoted to education actually came out for those years. FY14 is blank because they're still building a budget, so once that's in, we will populate that as well.
Andy?
Yes.
I just for clarification, I know that I was confused about this too at one point. The codes that you refer to, these are sort of the language that the state requires.
Correct.
We can look at our budget in some other ways, but this is a format that would allow someone to compare East Hampton with another school system, and it's not our choice in that respect. We need to break it out in this fashion.
Correct.
Thank you.
The next page is where we start to now get into the details of those function codes. You have the 1000 series, which is administration, showing the history of the projected funds for FY14 of $840,000, of which $10,000 of that will come from state and federal grants. The primary reason that people might want to know, why can't we use more? When it comes time for the state and federal grants, the primary purpose of those is to get to the direct education in the classroom. So there's a certain portion that we can use for administration, but again, using it where it's most appropriate, it would be in the buildings. The next section is the instructional services. This is where the rubber hits the road for what it is that we do. This is everything in the buildings that is related to direct instructional services, including the administration of curriculum and special education district-wide. Our budget for FY14 is just under $11.4 million. Of that $11.4 million, just $669,000 of it is projected to come from choice, $22,800 from our other revolving accounts, and $706,000 from the federal and state grants. And you'll see the breakdown of how those trends between FY10 actual, 11 actual, 12 actual, and our proposed 13 budget and 14 budget. The other school services, the next page is this deals with other school-related, not necessarily direct instruction, but things like nursing, athletics, attendance, transportation, and student activities. So you see, of the $1.1 million for this budget, $25,000 is coming from a revolving account, with the remainder projected to come from a local appropriation. The next is the operations and maintenance, of which we're looking at just under $1.7 million. And of that, $40,000 is coming from a revolving account. The revolving account is where we, building use for the rent that we charge for use of our facilities. We had a projected amount to use this year. The way things are trending, we're not gonna need that, so it's allowing us to use more into next year. So of the 1.68 million, 1.64 million is coming from local appropriation. Next is a fixed charges. What this represents is primarily insurances for non-health insurance related and/or contractual obligations based on negotiations that were done. There's an amount of money that we have to budget for based on insurance changes in the city's insurance, if you remember, 2 years ago. And then the other one is insurance and rental and lease of our copy machines. All that, the 54,000 is projected to come from local appropriation. Next up is what they call civic activities, and this is for community services for recreation department for our use of the fields in the city. It's been a pretty much a long-standing agreement. It's just under $61,000. That's all coming from local appropriation. And then lastly is the tuitions, which is a combined special education tuition and our tuition to Smith Voc and Lower Pioneer Valley, collaborative to C-Tech. The total proposed for FY14 is $2.2 million. Of that, $130,000 is projected to come from circuit breaker, and then just under $169,000 coming from federal and state grants. And then the local appropriation for those tuitions is $1.9 million. So that's a summary, if you will, of the way, and when we reviewed this with Budget Subcommittee, we kind of felt that this was a nice way to capture how is it that we spend, you hear me talk a lot about the all funds, and sometimes people get lost in the detail. But this is the peeling away of what does exactly all funds mean. Lastly, I want to show this.
And Andy, before you do that, what I realized is that I skipped over page 13, which was the Chapter 70 funding, which is the state's aid to education. And you can see from this chart that clearly that's been dipping, projected to increase somewhat this year. But the city does fund the schools above the requirement already.
Lastly, I'll bring your attention to PowerPoint and also with the handouts, I believe Nancy.
If you all have
You
handouts,
all
or
have
if you
handouts
don't,
for that.
Sue Colby has them
Yes.
here.
This dovetails, I say nicely, but not nicely, with the presentation done by Ms. Gilfeather. What you have here is a sort of what I call a quasi-combined balance sheet
You all
income
have this,
statement.
right?
I'm checking.
Sue,
I'm just double checking.
yeah, I think we have this, but I don't know where it went. Sue, did you give, yeah. Did you give one to the school committee member? Actually, we got one. It was hard to see on the PowerPoint. Thank you, Sue.
So what I captured here, we've been doing in our other clients, if you will. It's the three primary funding sources that are, other than grants because of the specific nature. These are sort of what, we really, I don't want to say have control, but there's most flexibility, if you will, in how is it that we use it. But the first two columns are school choice and circuit breaker. Those are revolving accounts that you've heard us talk about. And I went back from the end of fiscal year 2010 to projected end of the year, fiscal year 2014, the budget that we're discussing tonight, to show the history in each year to year of what we've received, what we've used, projected receipts for FY13 and projected uses for FY13, and the same for FY14. And you'll see, just picking the line of the starting point of 6/30/2010, we had $1,042,000 in school choice. All things going according to plan, our projected balance, as was referenced earlier by Superintendent Follinsby and what has been recommended in our budget presentation, is that the ending balance for June 30, 2014 is just under $347,000. That change from 6/30/10 to 6/30/14 is a 66% reduction in funds available, just under 67% available. So as I said, it dovetails nicely with what Ms. Gilfeather was talking about the funds drying up. You know, people always, sometimes, I say people, some people refer to school choice as a district's quote-unquote rainy day fund. I think you'll see that over the years, it's been raining. And we've had to use those funds available to us deeper than we would like. And now it's time to see what is it that we can do for other funding sources. The same story holds true for the next column, which is circuit breaker. That's the reimbursement program for special education expenses, primarily tuitions. That is not fully funded. We're on the hook for the first $27,000 of expenses, and then the expenses above that, we get a % reimbursement on that. And as of right now, they're hoping to shoot for FY13 to 70%. At the beginning of the budget development season for FY13, they were talking 75%. So if you look and see, we had in that June 30, 2010, $171,000, and then projected ending balance for June 30, 2014 is $59,629 for a change of 65% reduction in those funds available. And the third column is just a comparison with what it is from the local appropriation from the city for fiscal year 11. It's not I'd say the combined balance sheet income statement. It's the trends and what we received from the city for FY 11, 12, 13, and the change for those years to show the increase of 3% from FY 11 to projected proposed FY 14. Now, we're not sitting here saying that we'd love it if the city could do a 66% increase to offset, but it's giving an idea of what it is that we're talking about, that the school side, the other funding sources of the grants, revolving accounts primarily available to the schools, those are drying up, and the ability of the local appropriation isn't there based on the way things have been going historically. So that's just what this shows.
Andy, is the 3% number, that's the comparison of FY11
Correct.
with FY14 proposed?
Correct.
That's not an annual increase.
No.
That's a cumulative increase.
That's correct.
Spread over 4 budgets
That's correct.
of just over 3%.
Correct.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Andy. All right, so I will start the PowerPoint. Andy, you might want to just stand nearby in case
Okay.
this goes on. Okay. All right, so the recommended budget. The primary goals of the, and I wonder if we want to turn off the lights over near the screen, maybe make it a little easier to see. The primary goals of the FY 2014 budget are: 1, to align the budget to the greatest extent possible with the district priorities in the school committee district-approved strategic plan. Maybe you don't need all of them off, Sue. Thank you. Which are, that's good. 21st century learning environment for all students, small class sizes, and high-quality staff at all levels, safe and supportive school environments, enrichment opportunities for all students, and up-to-date technology and technology support. And the second goal, to assure further erosion of programs and services for East Hampton students, does not occur. What this budget accomplishes, the level service budget that we're recommending: it maintains the integrity of the educational program in the East Hampton Public Schools. It ensures our schools remain competitive with neighboring school districts in our ability to provide 21st century learning experiences for our students. And this has an impact, obviously, on choice in and choice out students. And it prevents the elimination of staff essential to providing our students with a quality education. This is a little bit of a history of what's happened to the school department budget. Here are the 2009-2010 budget cuts. Positions that were eliminated were a high school science teacher, a .5 high school social studies teacher, a .5 high school guidance counselor, a .5 high school drama teacher, 2 middle school classroom teachers, 1 middle school math specialist, a .5 middle school guidance counselor, 1 elementary classroom teacher, 1 elementary literacy specialist, 2 special education teachers, 7 paraprofessionals. In addition, there were reductions to computer technician hours, secretary hours, tutors, and $100,000 in texts and materials. There were also increases in bus fees, athletic fees, and building use fees. The total FTE positions lost, FTE means full-time equivalent, so 2 half-time would make 1 full-time, but the total positions lost, completely lost, not reduced, were 17. In 2010, 2011, and this is what Shirley Gilfeather was talking about, positions were restored because we had state funding from education jobs and SFSF grant funds. And these funds were provided to school districts with the hope that they would help us get over the economic cliff that we were facing at that point in time until better financial times for the state and hence for local towns and cities. So that money enabled us to return 1 elementary classroom teacher, 6 paraprofessionals, 1 guidance, and 4 of those paraprofessionals were, or 6 rather of those paraprofessionals, all 6, were kindergarten paraprofessionals, which we had eliminated in the previous year's budget to the detriment of our kindergarten classrooms. That was a very difficult year not having the kindergarten paraprofessionals. 1 guidance counselor, tutors. The total FTE positions restored was 8, but the net loss based on the positions that were lost in the previous year was 9. So we still are down 9 positions from the previous year, the 2009-2010. In 2011-2012, the budget cuts were the positions that were eliminated: a .5 high school shop teacher, a .5 high school math teacher, .5 guidance counselor, 1 middle school custodian, 1 elementary reading teacher, 2 special education teachers, 1 enrichment teacher, for a total FTE positions lost of 6.5. In addition, there were reductions to 2 library paraprofessionals. Instead of full-time, I believe it was that they were reduced to .6 positions, and reductions in 3 full-time secretaries to part-time secretaries. And Parsons School was closed, and the program at Parsons was moved to the high school. So the total positions lost from 2009 to 2012 were 15.5 positions. In 2012-2013, the budget cuts that we suffered for this year: positions eliminated, 1 English teacher at the high school, 1 world language teacher at the middle school, 2 elementary classroom teachers, 1 reading teacher, 1 English language learner teacher, a .5 school psychologist, 1 custodian. In addition, we had reductions from full-time positions to less than full-time positions of the assistant principal at the middle school, summer hours for guidance and to do assessments and preparation for the following year, summer hours for school psychologists, textbooks and supplies, special education contracted services, technology support, tutors, and funds for after-school programs. The total FTE positions lost for this current school year were 7.5. The total positions lost from 2009 to 2013, 23 positions. So the recommended budget. Level service budget of $17,386,999. Does not add any new positions. Does not replace 23 positions lost and other positions reduced. Does not replace needed funds for materials and supplies. Does maintain the important personnel, programs, and services needed to maintain our current educational program. Any questions on any of that from the school committee?
All right, Nancy?
Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, the school committee invites those of you who are here this evening that would like to make a comment or ask a question to come forward to the podium and give your name and your comment or your question. We certainly will ask that everyone has a chance that wishes to speak tonight concerning the budget, but also to keep in mind that we cannot entertain 30-minute presentations at the podium. So please be aware that there are others here tonight that do want to speak. And obviously, after we have heard from you and your comments and your questions, which we will be taking careful notice of this evening, the school committee then will have the opportunity to discuss the issues. All right, thank you.
Hi, my name is Tamara Smith. I was taking some notes and I just wanted some clarification on some different things that were said tonight. Before I say that, I think we're all feeling very sobered by what we just saw. That's devastating to see 23 positions having been lost, and knowing that none of them are going to be restored is just really tragic. I think we're all feeling that tonight. My first question was for Shirley. You had said that there are going to be a lot of programs that will be disappearing with the grants ending. And I was just wondering if you could give more clarification for what those programs would be. One of the things that I don't have a very clear sense of as a parent is what it is in my child's school day that they are receiving because of a grant versus because of the actual budget.
Shirley, can you speak to that?
I can.
Okay.
Let me speak from here, is it okay?
Can you hear
I think you
everyone?
probably want to come to.
You might want to come up so it can be recorded, Shirley.
Okay.
And the audience at home can hear better.
The audience at home, which I hope is having popcorn. Okay, so one of the first ones that comes to mind that I know has been a major cut for us is in literacy at the elementary school in terms of the reduction of the Title I literacy personnel. Provides reading recovery services as well as Title I services literacy in the schools. So that has been reduced from at least 5 positions that I can think of, Nancy, prior to my arrival.
And I think it's important to note that literacy services means support services for students who may be having difficulty learning to read and write.
Right. The gatekeeper of our education is our ability to read and write, and these folks are helping with that. So that's been reduced from 5 down to 3. So that's a significant difference right there.
And I'm going to interrupt again.
Yeah,
Those
please.
are direct services to students.
Right. In addition to that, other things that would be lost with this is, first of all, even the 3 remaining teachers are right now being funded out of Title I monies. Those Title I monies continue to be reduced each year. We don't know what the roll of the dice will be for next year, but the fiscal environment, and as you see in there, if you look at Title I, Code 305, you can see that we had a 12% reduction this year. So we could have another 12% reduction, and a 12% reduction is a pretty significant amount of money. I don't have my glasses on here, but about $55,000 from what I think I'm squinting and seeing, and that's a position. And so basically, if we have another reduction like that, might that mean that we either have to find that $55,000 out of local funds, this is where you laugh, or we lose a staff member providing those services. In addition to that, we can look at the loss of other Title I positions, such as the math support that we provide at the middle school, and to some degree at the elementary school as well, but primarily at the middle school level as a Title I building. We would lose that as well. In addition to that, something that's not necessarily a program, but we have been able to do, to speak to what the superintendent talked about in terms of those unfunded mandates that we are required to do by the state. One of those is the fact that we have new curricular standards in mathematics and English language arts. That requires us to do curriculum alignment work. We wouldn't be able to do that work if we weren't paying for it out of Title II funds. Okay, so that's another loss to us as well. Race to the top monies that we talked about a little bit earlier. The Race to the Top is giving us money to be able to do work in our guidance department at the high school. It's allowing us to do some infrastructure work that, by the way, is a requirement of the state that Mr. Schott has to take care of. It is funding a large portion of that otherwise would be coming out of local funds. While we could say that's not direct service to students, we can also say that without having that infrastructure, wouldn't allow us to take the data that we need to report to the state. So that also becomes critical.
And Shirley,
Yeah.
I just might add that we were very fortunate, and it was also through the skills of our grant writers and to receive those Race to the Top funds, because otherwise districts are going to be required to provide this infrastructure and find the funds to do it. So we were able to get grant funds to enable us to do that here in East Hampton. We've really relied a lot on grant funds, and I think we've become quite proficient at seeking and obtaining grant funds to fund the programs that we need for our students.
Right. Other things that might be more direct, I mean, the enrichment coordination that we have that's operating at the elementary schools and the middle school right now is a grant-funded piece as well. And I would say that a lot of, and this does become somewhat indirect, but certainly affects students, is a lot of these grants provide us with the professional development funds and the resources, materials, and supplies that are necessary to be able to provide to the students. In the process right now of doing what is a typical process this time of year of amending the grants, and one of the things that the Race to the Top grant is allowing now that it has never allowed before is it is allowing some expenditure on technology hardware, computers. Most of the grants have stopped funding anything like that, and they've said that that's the local responsibility out of local funds. But they've opened the door a little bit to us for one time only to possibly do some of that, which means that with the new testing that'll come in replacing MCAS, some of you may have read in the paper that testing, they're expecting to be done on computers. Well, we certainly don't have enough computers right now to have our students be taking some kind of a state-mandated test on computers. So that's another unfunded mandate that we're trying to take care of with grants that then would also provide those resources in the classroom for teachers as well. So some of it is professional development, and some of it is tools in the classroom use. I don't know if I'm missing anything else.
That was good.
That was it?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you,
Does that
Charles.
help you a little bit? Okay.
Hi, I'm back. Okay, the next question that I had, and I want to make sure that I'm remembering this the right way. Last year when we were going over the school budget, were there 3 different potential budgets, one increasing services rather than staying at the same level?
No, it was a level service, a recommended, and a level funded. The recommended was somewhere between the level funded and the level service, but the school committee approved the level service budget.
Okay. In the level services budget from last year, I just want to make sure that I'm remembering this right. We had increases to positions that had been eliminated previously as part of that level services budget.
No, we did not
No?
return any reduced positions.
Okay.
Eliminated positions, no.
Okay. I guess my question is, as a parent, I understand the need for a level services budget. I understand what you're proposing will happen if we only get a level funded budget. is it possible that the city will fund less than a level funded budget? Is it possible that we'll be seeing a greater disparity between what our schools need versus what they'll get? Or is that the lowest level that would be funded?
Well, I think anything's possible, but Mike, do you want to answer
It's
that?
probable that the request for this year won't be funded to the level of the, I presume that the school committee's gonna recommend the level service budget, 15.6 million, something like that. It's likely that that's more than we're gonna have available to spend for any increase. And there are statutory and contractual increases that we don't have any choice about. We're gonna pick up the extra $103,000 for school choice. We're gonna pick up an extra $55,000 for insurance for your grant employees. We're gonna pay for extra retirement. So all those come off the top of what we might have to spend. So it's unlikely that there'll be $600,000 available for the school budget.
So right now we're facing, although we would like to see a level funded budget,
Level service.
level service budget, we're we're hearing right now that we don't have the funds in the city for a level service budget. And I just want to make sure that I'm hearing you. Are you saying that it does look like we would have money for a level funded budget? Or are you saying that projections look like it would be lower than that?
There's no state budget at this point, so this is entirely speculation. Presuming that the state budget is level funded to us, so that we get the same state aid that we did last year. None of us are counting on the $2 billion tax increase the governor wants, and to be quite honest, we don't get served by that much anyway. We're only looking at local receipts, and the local receipt number that we're carrying is somewhere around $560,000 in new money.
So does that mean that there wouldn't be money for the level funded?
Well, the only identified increases I think I just mentioned, there was 160,000 or so related to the schools and another 125,000 or so related to other fixed increases that we can't avoid. So that means that there'll be roughly $350,000 to share. If we continue to share it the way we've shared it, then that means about $290,000 or so for the direct appropriation, and another 50,000 or so for those two items that I mentioned, the extra charges for school choice and the extra insurance costs for grant-funded employees in the school department.
Because I don't have the figures in front of me, I'm still unclear if you're saying that we probably wouldn't have enough money in the city budget to fund the lower of these two budgets.
Well, you asked if we're gonna level fund. We'll likely be able to do better than level funding,
Okay.
but we'll likely not be able to do what I believe the request from the school committee will do.
Okay. I had one other question. I know other people need to talk. You had mentioned the possibility of having to turn away students if there is not enough room in our classrooms. I know in the last year we've had to decrease more students, so many of our classrooms have gone to full capacity. I'm just wondering if our school district has had to turn away school choice students because of these position cuts, where we're actually turning away possible revenue because we don't have enough money to be able to support students.
Yes, we have had, yes, we have had to turn away students. At the middle school level, we had a number of students requesting to choice into our district, but we could not make our classrooms any larger and still have that quality of education. You know, all the research shows that there's a certain number of students in a classroom and beyond or student-to-teacher ratio that is effective for instruction for students, and beyond that, the effectiveness of instruction for students declines. The smaller numbers are particularly critical at the elementary level. We also do have a number of parents requesting to choice into our elementary schools, but our elementary schools are pretty much at capacity right now. Certainly in third grade, we have, I believe it's 26 children in one classroom, and that really is bordering on a level that's not optimum for instruction for students in third grade. So to take more students in who are not East Hampton students would, in effect, impact negatively the quality of the instructional program for our students, for our city students.
All right.
Okay,
Thank
thank you
you.
very much.
I will say, however, that whenever we're able to take a choice student in, we do that. And as my administrators can attest to, I check with them every time we get requests, and sometimes we get a number of requests, or parents who come and speak to me directly. I speak to my administrators, but I do have to trust them as the administrators of their buildings to give me advice on what they believe is appropriate. And certainly I have pushed them from time to time, and they have pushed back, but I do always listen when they give me their very sound reasons.
Good evening.
Hi, my name's Kara McElhone.
Karen?
Kara.
Carol.
Hi. I have a question, Mr. Mayor. There's a fixed percentage of funds that go to the schools each year?
Well, we try to share the growth in about a 2/3, 1/3 manner, yes.
And that's pretty much how it's been done.
Yeah, it was 58, 62 or so when I started, yeah.
So, well, I guess my question is, like, in light of the fact that we're looking at 23 positions, which I guess equals a 9% cut in positions over the past 4 years, is it possible that this year would be a good time to sort of reevaluate that percentage?
Likely not,
And why is it not?
because we offer other services in the community that have been affected in the same way.
Is it possible that this need over the past few years is greater for the school system this year than in other departments?
It is different for the school department this year than in other years.
But it's not going to be reevaluated
The
at all?
city doesn't have the capacity to make up for the losses you're facing in other government subsidies.
So it just won't be reevaluated?
We evaluate it every year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
Hello, my name is Casey Young.
Casey?
Mhm.
Okay.
I am an active member of White Brick Middle School 6th grade class. Because of budget cuts, teacher positions are being eliminated and programs are being lost. Personally, I am considering school of choicing out of the school district. I don't really want to leave the school district. However, the constant cuts are affecting the quality of my education. I'm not just worried about myself though. I'm worried about my younger sister and brothers. What will be left for them?
Thank you very much, Casey.
Good evening, Peter Marks.
Good evening.
Good evening. My question is, I know we last year had during some of the evenings we talked about the override. Nancy, I remember you saying that all the fat is gone and any more position cuts will cut into the bone. So clearly looking at what the mayor said, we're now cutting into the bone. And what I heard earlier, like that there most likely with the grant funding will be more bone cutting. At which point do you think our school system will die from this? I mean, and again, I'm not trying to be negative. I'm just saying, like, at which point do we need to do more than just like talk about it and actually, like, as a community, come together and do something about it? Because I feel like we're talking, we all agree we need more money, and I feel like almost like a deja vu from last year. We all say like, Mayor, we need more money, and the pie hasn't really grown, and it doesn't seem like anybody wants to make the pie grow. So I'm just wondering what the school committee or city government or whoever can do something about it, does something before we really hurt the school system too much. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah, I'll just make one comment. I mean, I think it's been very, very challenging for us as a leadership team to look at the budget and to think about the potential of making more cuts to our budget. As you can see from the budget book, you know, what we were able to come up with without significantly impacting our educational program further was around $200,000 of cuts, and it's a very, very difficult process, and you know, I don't think we really know at this point where we could possibly make those further cuts without having a further negative impact on our educational program. But we will, wait to see what the local appropriation is. And
I guess to respond a little more directly to Peter's question, you need to get the state and federal government to come to the table. This governor has not supported education for communities like East Hampton. Really all of the money that this governor's put forward has gone to what are so-called gateway cities. These are the older industrial cities that have a much larger poor population than we do. We're impacted significantly in the formulas because we won't raise our property taxes. So the city raises property taxes to the maximum allowed by law every year, and I get chided for that during every election, or at least I have. I won't any longer. But we can only tax to the limit of the law, and we do. So it's not like the local government or the local taxpayers are backing away from the need to fund. It really is the state and federal government that have backed away from it. And although I like our governor, he's not really looked at ways to holistically help everyone. He's looked at targeting certain things that he sees as being important, but generally his decisions have been at the detriment of others. And so winners, losers, when you have a leadership situation where you create losers, you always create problems. The Senate created the funding formula that we're currently existing under. That formula has driven the state's share of what's called the foundation budget, which is the minimum you can spend for education, to switch from the state supporting 55% of it and the city supporting 45% to the city supporting 55% and the state 45%. So every year that there's an increase in Chapter 70, we get less of it because they're trying to push the amount being supported back on the local property taxpayers. And as you saw, the local property taxpayers feel that they're paying enough taxes, and so they haven't allowed us to increase the limit under Proposition 2.5 through an override. So talking to your legislators, to your senators, Senator Knappich, to your representative, John Sybeck, asking them to look at funding formulas, asking to look at the inequities in those funding formulas are long-term solutions. They're not a solution for FY14. We're probably going to base a budget on, if we don't have a House budget in place by the time we have to submit to the City Council, we'll base it on level funding from last year. We aren't going to use the governor's numbers, to be quite honest. The governor's numbers only add about $40,000 anyway. But we can't really risk using those numbers because it doesn't look like the legislature is going to raise the taxes in the manner that the governor's asked for. It does look like they're going to try to support some transportation tax increases. That doesn't help with this discussion. It's very important because the roads are in terrible shape as well, but it doesn't help with the education discussion. And the federal government has simply stopped living up to the promise that they needed to make to cities and towns and to the population in general. They've gotten nothing done in 2.5, 3 years, except fight, and now we have sequestration, and that's what's driving down the grants. And to be quite honest, every community is facing the kind of grant shrinkage that East Hampton is facing. So I know that there's a dire picture been painted about East Hampton, but it's really about education in general. The federal grants are being reduced everywhere. Some of those communities that are more dependent on them than us are going to have a much harder time of it. Northampton, recently in a newspaper, they got their city council to agree to change health insurance so that they can use the GIC program and change the way that employees choose insurance. And that in East Hampton could have saved, the estimates are between $600,000 and $800,000. Your city council didn't go along with that. We've been working with the employees, trying to get the employees to allow us to go to a lower cost plan. It does shift some costs to the employees. They're dragging their feet and have refused to allow us to go that way as well. And I don't blame the employees. They don't want to pay more of their health care. But until we can reduce some of the costs that we have, there's really no way to shift the money. We do try to provide services for all parts of the population. The largest population, single largest population in East Hampton are elderly, and they get the smallest piece of the pie. But they get a piece of the pie as well.
Okay, thank you. Yes, we waited patiently.
Michelle Downer, parent of East Hampton.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Michelle Downer, parent of East Hampton.
Thank you, Michelle.
Hi, my name is Grace, 3rd grade, Pepin School. Do you know what it takes for a good education? Art, foreign language, computer skills. You're taking all this away from us. How will I succeed? How will I become the artist I'm supposed to be? You're making my classes bigger, making it harder to get the attention I need. My teacher is only one person. This is why you can't take any more away.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hi there, my name is Jacqueline Willett, and I'm a parent of 2 children in the system, one through the regular education and one through special education. And although both roads that they've traveled to get to where they are, the goal for them is both success. So I guess I would just like to comment that I feel like we're preaching to the choir. The people that are here want to give them the best, you want to give them the best. And that I would just ask that you keep the parents and the community informed of all of these things so that we can be an active member in this decision and where the money's going and how we can help benefit our own kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline.
On that note, can I make a comment, Nancy?
Certainly, go ahead.
Just following up on Jackie's comment, I just wanted to let you all know that we are going to try to put forth a strong effort to communicate our situation and share the needs here with Senator Knappich and Representative Sybeck and pursue this on a state level to the greatest extent that we possibly can. And any of you in this room that might be interested in helping us with that cause and really pushing this as best we can at the state level, I mean, I'd love it if you'd leave me your name and an email address so that we could try to organize an effort to really push this at the next level, see if we could affect some kind of a change. And you know, I hear a lot of feedback along the way in the investigations I've done so far that have been pretty discouraging. But, you know, if we don't try, it's really, I think the best we can do at this point is to give it our best shot and do what we can at the state level. So I just wanted to throw that out there, following up on what Jackie said. If anyone's willing to help out or be a part of that effort, I'd love to get your contact information and we can work together from this point forward.
And if I might, I know I'm chair, so I'll turn this gavel over to you for a moment, because I would like to make a comment along that line. I think it's absolutely essential that, of course, we work as closely as we possibly can with our state and federal, but also let's not forget that we have a city government. Let's not forget that you can speak to your neighbor, which happens to be a member of the city council. Let's not forget that the mayor has an open door. You can go and speak to the mayor your concerns. So let's not just jump over local government and say that state is our salvation or federal is our salvation. Right now, the closest thing we have to help and assistance is our local government. So let's not leave them out of the program. Back.
Hi, I'm Becky Sullivan. I have a kindergartner this year and one going into kindergarten next year. And rumor has it that one of our first grade teachers at Center Street is going to be retiring. So does that mean that we're going to replace her if she does retire, or is her slot going to just remain
I don't know. Nancy, can you speak to that? I don't know that we have an answer to that. Do you?
Well, you know, I think what we're hearing is that we are not going to get a level service budget. We don't have a level service budget. The difference between that and a level funded budget is around $600,000. We have found $200,000 without having to cut positions that are critical to the education of our students. That leaves approximately $400,000 that we would have to find in cuts. And the way that we can make up $400,000 is through positions in our district. That's the only way we can make up a difference of $400,000. So I guess, you can do the math.
Right. And I mean, our children are our future. And we have MCAS and things like that. I mean, granted, they're little, they don't have to worry about that yet, but if we keep cutting the teachers and the programs that are supposed to be teaching them how to read and write, where are they going to be when they get to that point where they need those services? My son is in the special education, I mean, and I already feel like he's not getting a lot of the services he needs, and yet we see the cutbacks are happening there too. And I know you guys want the best education for all of our kids across the board, whether they have special needs or not, but I really hope that there's some other way that we can find with the mayor and the other city council to give us some more funding, because everybody across the board in the schools need it as well.
Thank you, Becky.
Yeah, Nancy, I mean, just to reiterate, there is going to be some growth in the budget, and that growth will come, some of that growth will come directly to the school department in an appropriation. But I don't, as I said, I don't think there's going to be 600.
Your estimate is that it's be closer to 2, as I did the math
Well,
before.
yeah,
Very
yeah,
hard
and
to
these are-
estimate.
And these are certainly
Right.
numbers that I'm pulling out of the air at the
Right.
moment.
I think that the reason that I asked that, Mike, and Nancy, I want to pick up on something you just said. While we can't revisit what occurred in the last vote in terms of a budget override, you can ask questions. In addition, to sharing your concerns with your city councilor, you can ask your city councilor what his or her position was on providing that additional funding. We heard some pretty discouraging comments, as I recall, city councilors telling the school system that it needs to learn with it, to live within its means. I invite that city councilor to bring his red pen and to slice out the names of the teachers that he would like us to dismiss in order to live within our means. But the elections are the way you hold people accountable. And I think that it's important to appeal to the governor and to the state legislature. I particularly think the formula issue is crucial, and that maybe there's more hope there than there is in outright revenue, because I think that's tight everywhere. But I do think it's important to talk to the city council about votes that they take that end up affecting and the leadership role that they chose to play in support or in opposition of the most recent appeal that we made to the community to fund our children's future. I think that's, there's some questions that need to be answered there. And I hope that people in the community will join with us and continue to urge the city council to consider how they fund the schools and to remind them that elections are coming again.
Thank you, dear. Hold on just a second. Let me see if there are any other people that would like to speak that have not spoken. Yes.
You may have talked about this early in
Me.
I'm sorry, I'm Heather LePen.
Okay, Heather.
You may have talked about this early in the presentation, but you discussed 23 positions that were cut from 2009 to 2013. Can you refresh my memory about what the enrollment changes were from 2009 to 2013? Was there a significant change in enrollment?
Not a significant change, no.
Okay, well, I agree with a lot of the other comments that this has been a really kind of horrifyingly eye-opening meeting for me. And I've been spending a lot of time over the past few years talking to people about, what a wonderful city East Hampton is and what great things are happening here. And but I don't feel that a city can be wonderful if we're not putting education as a priority. And so I think this is disappointing, and I hope that we can work towards at least a level service budget and do what we can to get as close as we can to that.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Heather. Is there anyone else that would like to speak that has not spoken? Yes.
Hi, my name's Jackie Brousseau Pereira. I have a couple of kids at Center School. In fact, my third grader is in that giant class, and also the class that lost the paraprofessionals in kindergarten. So yes, this is very sobering, isn't it? It's surprising to see. And looking at the numbers, and it's a shame that the parents in the audience didn't have the book as you were going through it. It was kind of hard to follow the presentation, so I don't know what to do about that. Make them available online? I don't know.
Online.
Is it?
It is
Okay. I
online.
didn't get that
Yes.
memo before I got here, but that's okay. But it's pretty clear that the schools can't sustain more cuts and keep the level of effectiveness that they have now. And I think people made the point that the schools aren't just for our children, right? They're the basis of a strong community. So you have a great education system that leads to more people moving in. It leads to more, tax base and all of that kind of stuff. So we have to at least have a level service budget, it seems to me, in order to just maintain what we have, and so that we can continue to tell people to move here like Heather and I do all the time. I agree, Mike, with you that it's not just going to happen at the city. It's a push that has to happen beyond here. But I had a couple questions actually for the mayor about other potential sources of money. Is there money in the free cash account? Are there other sources that we're not looking at? I mean, great that we're getting all these grants, but it sounds like they're not going to last forever. So
free cash is one-time, non-recurring money. There's about $100,000 remaining there. I likely would not recommend that fund be used to support ongoing costs, because you're just pushing the cliff a little further out. There's about $1 million in the stabilization fund, which is our long-term reserves. We have not used those reserves in, I believe, 2 budgets. They were used.
it's raining.
Well, just so you know, they were used for 5 years and nearly depleted. And so it may be raining, but we need to make sure that the boat doesn't sink. So there needs to be, in order to maintain bond ratings, to be able to afford to build a school, to be able to afford to hopefully do further work in the schools, we need to make sure that our financial condition is such that we can maintain good bond ratings. We can't afford to just spend the savings because we need it today without some understanding of how we're going to replace it.
But is it something that you would at least think about looking at? Is there a way to use a little bit of it to shore up something, thinking through sort of the future
Sure.
projections?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think we can certainly consider it. It's a very, I'm concerned about what I leave for the next administration. And I'm also concerned that I hate to harp on it, but we don't have good leadership in the legislative body in this community. We have some nice people, but they really don't see the big picture. So I think the comment that Peter made about elections coming up in there, people need to think about running and think about putting your passions into the work that the people who you elect do. Because there are folks who don't see it, who represent us.
Thanks.
But I will certainly consider whether it's prudent to use stabilization reserves in the budget.
Great.
Thank you very much, Jackie. Is there anyone else that would like to speak that has not been heard tonight? Oh, wait, I'm sorry.
Always go with parents first.
Parent first.
First, I have a question for clarification. If the override had passed, if the voters had decided to fund the override, would we be going through this right now, or would we not be facing this financially?
We would not be facing this.
Okay. My second part of that question is, last year I know it was at the school budget meeting where it was suggested and proposed to the parents that we consider pushing for an override in the community. and then the school committee initially backed it and then led it as saying that we really need an override. And I'm hearing that this year that's not a possibility, and I would just like to have some clarification as to why it's not a possibility and something that we're putting on the table to bring it back to the voters a second time.
Well, I think I could say, I don't think we've said it's not a possibility, and I don't think we've said it is a possibility. I don't think that is the topic for this evening. We have not looked into it, we have not discussed it, we have not made any kind of movement for, against, backwards, sideways. In other words, we just have not met that issue before tonight. I mean, so it is not on the table tonight.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that it cannot be if the school committee chooses to put it on the agenda.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Well,
Shirley.
oh, Shirley, I'm sorry. See how quickly my memory goes. I'm sorry.
Or as people would say who know me, would it be an evening without Shirley speaking again? Mayor Mike, who I hold in great esteem, has a very difficult position because he is the gatekeeper of the monies. And I don't know Mike well enough to know what sign he is, if he's a Virgo or if he's a Libra, okay? I don't know enough to know exactly about Libras. I don't think I've met too many.
Balance everything.
Balance everything. Well, see, now that just ties right in because Mayor Mike has a formula that has worked very effectively for him, and I think Kara McElhone kind of addressed that a little bit earlier. And I guess I'm thinking back, because I'm old enough to do so, of times in other towns and town governments where fiscal times were not great, not as dire as we're talking about now, where the heads of the school and the heads of the fire department and the heads of the police department got together with the mayor or town council, as the government may have been, and sat down and had the same kind of discussion that we had as administrators, where we sat down and said, it's going to hurt us all, but what can we throw into the pot? And how can we make a decision about what things need to be this year? So when you look at that piece of paper and you see that it looks like a lot out of the high school and a lot out of the middle school and maybe not as much out of the elementary, the superintendent was quick to tell you, when you look at a previous year, it looked different in the other direction. So what it was is it was a meeting of minds of sitting down and saying, how can we deal with this? What can we do as a group? And they made that decision as a group. And so I guess one of my comments is it possible to bring people around the table and make a decision as a group so that that decision is made by the people that head the departments, giving some recommendations, because the final decision will clearly be yours. So that's one suggestion. That may be something a little out of the ordinary, a little different than how it's been done in the past, but that's one thing, because, and it's not, that's not an attempt to say, let's pit the fire department against the police department against the school department. But in the conversations that we had, we weren't pitting high school against middle school against elementary. We talked together as members of an educational community. And so I think we need to talk as departments of a member of a community and keep it local and talk about the decision there. So that's one piece. Another piece is, you know, I had to go online, of course, and take a look at things. And when I was online, I came across a recent article. And that article talked about capital expenses. And they quoted, but with limited funds, Mayor Michael Tosnick is in the process of finalizing the list to look at the most dire of funds first, or needs first. Again, look at the most dire of needs to fund first. The article continued to say, now this was a relatively recent one, but in all fairness to you, I'd have to get the date, but it was relatively recent. The city currently has $898,036 in free cash. However, some of that money will be likely spent on a range of budget shortfalls to include $103,000 for the fire department for overtime, $100,000 for a shortfall in the police department's budget. Shortfall, not meeting their budget. Among other pending requests before the council. And so there are other requests that somehow have come forward to the council that might be being looked at for that free cash. So what I'm saying is there a possibility that some of that free cash, and I think we were just addressing that, I'm not saying give us $600,000 out of free cash, but is it possible that some piece of that could be brought forward to help with the gap closing? Is it possible that that $300,000 that you mentioned, you said maybe the difference in the state would be, I don't remember what you said, $500,000 or $600,000, and then you said, but $100,000 has to go to this and something has to go to that, and you said it may leave around $300,000 to be shared, okay? And again, I go back to that sharing piece, and I say maybe this is the year that with those departments sitting down, they say, look, we'll take the budget we're getting, but the $300,000 needs to go to the schools this year, along with the $200,000 that the schools have already said that they can cut, not easily, but can cut. We're already at $500,000. So I think that there are possibly, I mean, one of the things, I hate to use rainy day funds. You know, in my own government, when we talk about it, I live in Greenfield, when we talk about it, you know, we're always looking at that, and it's depleting those resources. But guess what? We're depleting all of our choice money. That's our rainy day fund. And we're depleting all of it just to get where we came tonight. So those are just some, in all esteem, suggestions to you. At the same time, I would agree. Maybe the meeting that we need to go to next is not another school committee meeting, because we're talking to the choir. I strongly suggest, and I certainly will, if I am not already committed on that night, it'll be the next one, I'm going to be at a town council meeting. And I invite all of you, and please bring a friend, that we come to the next town council meeting and hope that we can possibly educate and influence the town council. Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley. All right, I'm going to hold you to the brief second.
Absolutely. Because what you said about the city council, I actually asked the city council in the last city council meeting about talking about this and making a stand on it. And I was told that the city council is not responsible for any of these budget decisions, and it's not part of their discussion. It's all up to Mayor Mike. Whatever he decides is what they get. They can only cut, so we shouldn't come to them for funding. So I'm not sure if that is the actual truth of the rule of the books and everything, Mayor Mike, but maybe something to at least like bring up and educate the parents about what city council can and cannot do, because like I said, I was told I should see the mayor about funding for the schools and not the city council. Thank you.
Can you explain that, the role of city council?
Well, I really can't speak for the city council. They just incorporated the gag rule, so they won't talk to you at citizen speak time. I don't know why they did that, but the way that the charter is written, funding originates in the mayor's office. Doesn't mean that city councilors can't come and lobby for certain funding. Doesn't mean that school committee members can't come and lobby for certain funding. Nancy was in my office yesterday, day before, Friday, Saturday, Thursday, whatever it is.
All those days.
And so they have a role to play. It is not, I think that they weren't being disingenuous to Peter. They can't come in and say we are going to fund schools at 16 million. It doesn't matter what gets cut. They don't have that authority. Okay. They do have the authority to come in and say, Mr. Mayor, we have to fund schools. Why aren't you putting $16 million to schools? They don't do that either, but they could. And they could play this is a relatively new government for all the players. I mean, it's 17 years old, but it's still relatively new. And there isn't a lot of that going on. And there hasn't been in the 17 years that I've been here. There'll be a new administration next year. There'll be a new opportunity. Hopefully there'll be some new city council members. And there might be another opportunity to have those kinds of discussions. Just to go back to Shirley's point, just so that you all have a little bit of history, The reason we got from 55 or 58% to 67% was because of the willingness of the other departments to look at how can this pie be split differently. I don't know that I can bring them any further. I would defer that conversation to the superintendent to talk to the department heads, or to other staff in the school to talk to the department heads and have a conversation. And I don't know where that would lead. But I don't know that I can bring them any further personally. But they really have been a very responsive group to the needs of the schools. Just, I think that, again, not to speak directly for them, but I think that they all feel as strapped and as in as tough a shape as the school administration feels. Because they have their own stories to tell you. It's not about students in schools, but it's about whatever they deliver for services.
Could you try, though? Could you try, I mean, as the leader of the city, to lead that effort? Bring everybody together and see what comes of it? What possible solutions could?
Sure, I could try. I don't know that, again, without giving them an opportunity to have conversations directly with school administration about what they see, I don't know how, I don't know how much good that would be.
You could bring it all together and facilitate it.
Sure.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Mike.
I will not referee it.
I'll be happy to. Are you moving to the, oh, certainly. I didn't know that we were moving out or up.
I think you all know me, Allison Rebello, the principal of Whitebrook. I just wanted to share that the schools have been trying to be really creative to, and again, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but our STEP group, which is our parent group, our school council group, has been doing lots of fundraising to help our schools out, and I appreciate everything that they do. Unfortunately, we can't raise enough funds to support an entire teacher or to support some of the cuts that we need to make. They've been doing an excellent job. We did a Dine Out East Hampton, where the businesses in East Hampton were wonderful about supporting Whitebrook, and I know that they support the other schools as well, with giving percentages of funds to support us, to help with, you know, things that students need that we can't support from the budget. So we have been really creative. The parents have been extremely creative. The businesses in East Hampton have been supportive. But I just want to share one more time that, you know, as a leadership group, and I'm sure that Superintendent Follansbee has shared this with the mayor and with the school committee, that, you know, we have worked really hard at pulling together and figuring out what are anything from our budget that we can pull together. The things that are on here, whether it's from the high school, Whitebrook, Center Pepin, Maple, we know that all of these cuts are going to be difficult. Anything beyond what we came up with are all positions. And as you saw from the over 20 positions that have been cut, we're at the point where we cannot cut anymore. I don't know what we would do if we had to cut anymore. And so I just, you know, urge you, Mayor Mike, whatever you can do, knowing that the reductions that we made, we're going through every line item and scraping every penny that we possibly could make. And the only thing left that we have is teaching positions, which is going to affect our students. And like I said, the parents have been wonderful about trying to support our schools and doing what they can. And teachers are going above and beyond, doing things that, you know, 2 teachers might have done before, and we have 1 teacher, and they're trying to differentiate instruction for students, and they're trying to provide the same, you know, teaching and learning that they've had with more teachers, and they are going above and beyond, and there's a point where we can't go above and beyond anymore, and we can't cut anymore.
Thank you, Allison. Yes, ma'am. I think this will be our last word.
Hi, I'm Ann Knapp. I'm the Special Education Director for the City of East Hampton. I'm not going to preach to the choir. We all know what we need. I think one of the things that hasn't been stressed enough this evening is the first thing when you ask a young family or a family with children, what do they look at when they're looking to buy a home in a town? The first thing they say is, I look at the quality of the schools. If young people are not willing to come into East Hampton on the basis of the quality of the school, that drives down home prices. When home prices are driven down, revenues are reduced. It becomes a spiral that feeds on itself. For all of us to maintain the integrity of all of the services that all of the people need, for those of us who are older and are looking at what we are going to leave as a legacy to our own children, maintaining the values of our homes by maintaining a quality education is tantamount. Thank you.
Thank you. A very good last word. Thank all of you so much for your comments and for your interest. It's very heartening to me, and I think to all of us, to hear your thoughts and your words. And yes, you are preaching to the choir, but every now and then the choir needs a little preaching too. So thank you. After Nancy's and Andy's and all the information that we've been presented tonight and the words from our community, the chair entertains a motion concerning the budget for 2014.
I make a motion to recommend the fiscal 14 budget of $17,386,999, of which we will be asking the city for $15,614,811.
Million.
Do I hear a second to that motion?
It's okay. That's just start with million.
It's fine.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion.
Yeah, this is the first time that the school committee has voted the grants. And I don't know about the grants, so I don't know whether or not they are subject to appropriation.
Voted the grants?
What do you mean?
Yeah, the 17 million includes the grant funds.
The other budgets, or at least while I've been superintendent, have included the grant funds as
Not
well.
not
That's
this
the
motion.
level service budget.
I know, but
We
not
approved
this,
that
this
last
motion
year.
has not been made that way. It's okay, I don't mind, but it is not the same motion. You can check last year's records, I don't think it's the same motion.
Can you explain the distinction
Well,
that you're
I-
drawing? I think I understand what you mean,
The
Mike, but I'm not
distinction is
sure.
that grants are not subject to appropriation, and they certainly can be voted, but I think that the grants are really the discretion of the superintendent. Not that it's a pressing point, especially if it's not a point to the superintendent, then I'm perfectly happy with it.
It's not a point to the superintendent.
Right, and if my memory serves me, last year, well, I guess that's probably not a good way to start, but
Be fair to yourself.
last year, we did vote to accept the level services budget that was presented to us by the superintendent.
Is it difference because she included the amount requested from the city? Is that the difference?
No, the last vote I recall was the amount requested from the city, not the grants.
Well,
Not the all funds.
Right, I don't recall ever voting the all funds number. That's the only thing I'm raising. It's not critical. The intent of the motion is certainly clear enough.
I see what you're saying.
right, and last year, the discussion technically was, there was an attempt by the superintendent, I think, to put forward a budget that was between level funding and level service.
Right.
And that we took that in, but as a school committee voted instead for level service. So, and again, I think that's just a fine point, but I think that was the process that we went through last year.
So as
Mr. Paquette has
Mr. Paquette.
a little enlightenment,
Sure.
I hope.
One of the things as far as the recommendation from my point of view regarding the motion is for audit purposes. Auditors kind of like to look and see as far as the involvement and knowledge of the school committee regarding the funds associated with the budget. You control school choice, we'll come back with the school choice budget per se and stuff. So in our other districts, auditors have been looking for sort of a two-tiered, if you will, vote of all funds with a local appropriation amount from whatever the appropriating authority is. So that's why.
So the way that it was framed is
That's fine.
good according to the auditors.
Sure.
All right.
And so you might think in the future voting all of the funds that way, the 20.5 million that we actually spend for education in the community.
It's part of the educational process that we got to go through, right?
Yeah,
And getting the information out there.
There's $5 million that's hasn't even been discussed tonight.
All right, other than the wording of the budget, is there any discussion about the approval of the budget that has been presented to us by our superintendent for level services funding?
Well, I guess I as someone who, I understand that level service is where we have to go. I still want to keep alive the best hope and promise of the discussion around the override. And while I'll vote in favor of this proposed budget tonight, I hope that we can continue to explore through all of the various ways that have been mentioned here. We had a dozen wonderful voices, perhaps more, contributing useful ideas and suggestions, and I think applying pressure where pressure is useful to apply. We do know in the long run that level service gets us only so far, and that ultimately we as a community have to invest more and build back. What the picture that was painted tonight, barring some extraordinary numbers and changes in enrollment, and I trust the superintendent's point that the changes in enrollment have been much smaller than the percentage changes in the staffing that we've provided in the schools. And I come back also to the point about turning students away as a source of revenue, and as in the places where we do succeed. And I think there's going to be a great deal of success that's going to come out of a building that's going to open up in the next month. I think that's going to be a source of people wanting to come. So I hope that we will find ways to go beyond level service now, and succeed in restoring and investing and growing the quality of the East Hampton school system going forward.
Are we prepared to vote? I have a motion and a second to approve the proposed fiscal year 2014 budget in the amount of $17,386,999. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion has passed. Thank you.
Nancy, can I ask a favor? I imagine that a lot of folks here are going to leave, as I can understand, because of the late hour. I had sent both Nancy's an email, and I'd like to share an example of the extraordinary good work that's been done by the young people and educators in the community, if I could just take a moment.
Okay, certainly. It's announcement, so.
I just want to say that this past Saturday, an event was held at my school, Williston, and though East Hampton was not there as a team to compete in the program, the success of this program that brought together students from 4 different states and 6 different schools from across New England, from New Hampshire, Vermont, Connecticut, as well as 2 from Massachusetts. This event would not have succeeded were it not for the participation of people in the East Hampton school system, in particular the students in East Hampton. We needed 20 judges for this event to be successful. 10 of the judges came from East Hampton High School. 7 of those were students. Now, just to frame this, and some of you who have parents of high school age students will understand, what's involved to take 7 hours out of a teenager's life on a Saturday afternoon, when it was actually kind of a nice sunny day, and it's been the end of a long school week for them. I think it's just extraordinary, and if I can, I'd like to just mention by name Taylor Dadman, Tristan Koopman, Zachary Lewis, Michael Palashek, Tom Palashek, Willow Ross, Jordan Burt. I'd also like to mention Allison Evans, who's a student teacher working in the high school in the history department and is a marvelous educator and is going to have a fantastic career. And I hope somebody local has the wisdom to hire her before she crosses the city lines at the end of the school year. Our own school board chair, Nancy Sykes, came and assisted, and of course I think a lot of the credit for this goes to one of many great teachers that we have, Kelly Brown, who not only spent the 7 hours there but spent a lot of time keeping me sane in the organizing of the event going forward. This was extraordinary. We got national attention for this. It was the first time an event like this had ever been done in this way in the field of civic education. And what these East Hampton kids did with the one resource that they seem to have, they don't have a lot of money, but they have time and they have wisdom and they have energy and they have what we call in the field civic virtue, a willingness to set aside their own interest in how they could have spent their Saturday afternoon. And they came and they just did an incredible job. I was only able to see part of it because I could only be in one place at any one time during the event, but I saw 5, 6 of these people in different moments during the course of the day. And I heard from the other students and the other teachers who, as I say, came a long, long way to be here, how overwhelmingly impressed they were that a school that wasn't even involved directly in the competition would make that kind of contribution to see it succeed. So while we have some tough news on the budget tonight, I think this is one small example. And as Kelly has pointed out, these are just some of the many wonderful kids that are at the high school and at the middle school and the elementary school. We saw more of them tonight speaking to us. So I want to be sure that people who leave the room have that also as part of their memory of this evening. It's all not just about tough numbers. We have some great human beings in the school system. And again, I thank you, Nancy, and I thank all of those folks. And I look forward to the great work that they're going to continue to do when they can run for city council and they can run for mayor and they can bring their wisdom and their willingness to bear on questions like this, because I think we're going to be in great shape. So thank you for letting me do that.
Thank you, Peter. And I just would add one more word to describe our East Hampton students that participated on Saturday. Class.
Yeah.
They displayed incredible class. And thank you, Peter, for
What was the
for
program?
recognizing
What was
them.
it that was taking place?
Well, it was a New England showcase built off, you know that the school East Hampton High School participates in the state We the People program. The teams from throughout New England, in an effort to get ready for the national finals, which occur next month in April, thought, wouldn't it be neat to come together in a location and work together? And so we did a series of essentially rehearsals. And we needed great judges to come and ask tough questions and to give us good feedback. And as I say, we got terrific. My students benefited enormously, and we're looking forward to repaying the favor down the road. So.
All right, thank you, and thank everyone. We're now going into our regular session. You are free to stay. It's not generally the hottest ticket in town, but
Nancy, before people go, could I put this out there for email addresses?
oh yes, please do. We made it.
Run that.
There'll be a sheet up there for them to sign up if they have their name and email.
Okay,
All right.
help with the statewide effort.
Superintendent, do you have? Oh well, let's
give them a moment.
Dinner is usually served around 10 if you. Nancy's obviously getting hungry.
That was in your pile. What do I have?
Okay.
I think Nancy's answer was
I think we have some announcements, correct, Superintendent?
We do. We actually have a number of announcements.
Okay, 1 second to switch the disc. Everyone up.
Oh my
to jumping
goodness.
jacks.
Have we ever had that happen?
I don't think we've ever filled a whole disc.
Oh, hey, can I
Did you see this?
borrow your
I know.
Can I borrow this?
Saw that.
Can I just swipe this?
Gavel.
No, I just gotta go run quick, make a copy while we're switching that, because I have mine electronically, but I can't write notes on my thing tonight.
Better,
We're
you're
good?
better off to use this.
Okay.
Okay, Nancy, Superintendent Follinsby.
So I will read the announcements. We have quite a few tonight. The next school committee meetings are April 9th, May 14th, and 28th, and June 18th, 2013. The Joint Committee of the City Council and School Committee will meet tomorrow, March 27th at 6 p.m. here at 50 Payson Avenue, 2nd floor. White Brick Middle School Fine Arts Night is Wednesday, March 27th. There is a half day of school on Friday, March 29th due to Teacher Professional Development Day. Grade 1 through 4 report cards will go home April 1st. Elementary Cultural Festival is scheduled for April 11th from 6 to 8 p.m. There's no school April 15th through and including Monday, April 22nd due to spring break, Teacher Professional Development, and the East Hampton High School Move-In Day. White Brick Middle School Transition Night is Wednesday, April 24th. Kindergarten screening will be held at Maple School on May 2nd and May 3rd. High School Junior Senior Prom is Friday, May 3rd at Chez Joseph. White Brick Middle School Spring Concert is Thursday, May 23rd. There's a half day of school on Friday, May 24th due to Teacher Professional Development Day. There is no school Monday, May 27th due to Memorial Day. Center Pep and All School Show is at 9:30 a.m. on May 29th and 30th. White Brick Middle School Washington, D.C. trip is Wednesday through Friday, May 29th through 31st. Center Pep and 4th grade visit to White Brick Middle School is May 31st. Center Pep and Book Fair is June 3rd through 6th. Senior outing is Monday, June 3rd at High Meadows in Granby, Connecticut. White Brick Middle School Enrichment Night is Monday, June 3rd. Senior Class Night is Wednesday, June 5th. Elementary Ice Cream Social, Art Show, and Book Fair is June 6th. 2013 graduation is Friday, June 7th at 7 p.m. in the new high school. White Brick Middle School Awards Night is Wednesday, June 12th. Center Pep and Field Day is June 21st. White Brick Middle School 8th grade continuation is scheduled for the last day of school. The last day of school is currently scheduled for Wednesday, June 26th, which is a half day for students. A lot of events going on.
I'll say thank you. I don't believe we have any correspondence, do we? Thank you. Do we have any gifts?
No gifts.
Don't have any gifts. And we couldn't possibly have any public speak. So
I don't think so.
I don't think so. Subcommittee reports, finance.
Finance you have in your packet. It's regarding the last meeting we had, which I did talk about at the last meeting. We just met and spoke about the budget.
Okay. Do we need a motion to accept the report? Oh, I didn't think so. Let's see, policy review.
Policy, we met last Monday, March 18th. Those minutes will be in your packet for the April 9th meeting. For the most part, we discussed new policies recommended by the superintendent, which will be brought forward at the April 9th meeting. There is one policy worth mentioning, that's the naming of facilities policy, given there's been public input regarding the naming of the library at the high school. After some discussion and review of policies from other school districts, we came to the agreement that our district policy is appropriate, not in need of any revisions, and will be provided to the naming subcommittee to have as guidelines for their recommendations.
Okay.
And on that topic, we also agreed to recommend to the naming subcommittee that it's not necessary to name specific rooms. That's our opinion. But instead, we feel that we could honor individuals in other ways, such as plaques, benches, etc., that would give more individual attention to a person and or a specific achievement. And Nancy will provide that naming policy to the subcommittee.
All right. Any questions for policy? Thank you. Thank you.
That's it.
CES.
You have a written report in your packet, so you can see the items we spoke about or discussed on March 13th. One of the things I just wanted to highlight is these grievances. We frequently hear these at these meetings that I go to, and since I have been on the school board, We have never had any of that come to us. And you need to understand how lucky we are that these do not come to this level. What makes it even harder is most of these grievances are for, the CES has DYS and another one. They're contracts really for people on Boston. These are Boston teachers that are coming to us. I mean, I just realize how lucky we are that we do not have to hear these. The one other thing I wanted to share with you that I learned after this, and I've heard that it's been in the newspaper, is I had mentioned how CES is worked the past couple of years on revigorating and running the Dean Technical High School out of Holyoke. And they're having some issues with the Holyoke School Department and getting the appropriate funding. And at the moment, they've sent a letter to back away from this, stating that they just can't continue because of the funding. So it's very sad because CES has done a lot for Dean Tech right now, but the school department just isn't supporting that school enough. So just something else I wanted to share.
Thank you. All right. Yes, tell us some good news.
Well, I have a lot of news since it is
But
the
speak
end
up
of
to
the
the camera, because everybody else is gone in the room.
The student council is currently working on planning the community dinner, and we're still trying to work some details out. We are also starting to work with Dr. Perrone about getting students and the community into the new building. He is going to talk to us this week about possibly going in next week with student tours and maybe one night having it open for the community. And students would be there to give tours and show people around so that way they don't get lost. And a lot of students and teachers are just getting ready for the move. Yes. Their teachers are starting to box up their classrooms. I know that I'm interning with Miss Brown right now, and I've been working all year on organizing her classrooms. That way it's easier to move it, and that way when we get in there I can help her put everything away, and a lot of other students are helping teachers as well. All the AP classes are going to start getting ready for the AP exams, which will be happening in the beginning of May. I have 2 AP classes right now, so I'm preparing for both of my AP exams. And a lot of seniors are getting really excited for prom, which is May 3rd. We are currently selling tickets, and we'll be selling tickets up until April break. And
How much are prom tickets nowadays?
Are you
right
going?
now-
Oh, you meant these days? Yeah. At first, I thought it was like an invitation for all of us, so I was glad you.
Our senior class is selling them for $60, but all seniors have to pay their class dues before they can get a prom ticket. And also a lot of seniors are getting ready to make their decisions on where they want to go in the future, whether it's to college, the military, or into the workforce.
Run for city council.
Great. And do that as well.
Well,
Thank
thank you,
you.
Bailey. I thought that the article that was in the Gazette was very interesting about the program at the high school, about the alcohol and program.
Well, Students Against Destructive Decisions.
Yes, yeah. I couldn't remember the organization, but I thought it got very good coverage.
Very good.
All right. I'm anxious for the tour of the new building. Miss Superintendent, I believe.
Yes, I
But
have just a...
there's more.
Yes, there is.
There's more than
I'm
money.
sure we're all happy that there's more here. I'm asking Andy Paquette to come to the podium again and to talk to you about his request for a change in the warrant approval process.
Again? No. What it is actually is that it's just business office. We're finding it, I don't want to say difficult, but it can be as far as the cycle of when the accounts payable warrant is done and the payroll warrant is done. When this first came to our attention about the pre-approval, the city finance director suggested, in getting the approval was either finance subcommittee or even a superintendent. And then obviously with subsequent approval of the warrants by the whole committee. So I would say, and we initially recommended the finance subcommittee because, my logic would dictate that, but with the challenges as far as timing, and also it would free up the time of the finance subcommittees not having to come in when we call and say, hey, the warrants are ready, come in and sign, that if you were to authorize the superintendent to approve the warrants for submission to the city with subsequent approval of the warrants by a full committee after the fact.
This is twice a month.
Correct.
There's a hardship coming in twice a month to sign warrants?
To meet the timelines as far as turning it, it's a quick turnaround once we get the warrant done up here for both accounts payable and payroll, then for it to be downstairs for submission for direct deposit and the processing of the check cutting. The city auditor's office doesn't want to do that without the approval. So even though it's twice a month, I understand what you're saying, the window of opportunity for getting the signatures in before downstairs and for them to release the checks is very short.
So warrants are processed on a Tuesday and they're signed by the city on a Wednesday. So when do you work on them?
We work on them all the way up until Tuesday.
So if you worked on them all the way up till Wednesday of the prior week, you'd have Thursday.
The issue is though, as far as things like for payroll.
Doesn't that, it's not correct.
I'm confused, but.
All right, I think I get it, but correct me, that, Andy, that you are asking that we make a motion to grant the superintendent authorization to approve the warrants.
Correct.
Twice monthly.
Doesn't she already kind of do that? I mean, everything's pretty much signed off by her anyway. It seems redundant, but.
Well, but this is giving up the authority of the school committee. This is saying the school committee no longer has to be the authority that law says it is.
I would respectfully disagree in that it's really, I'd say, the process of getting it downstairs, because we have run into, on a couple occasions, calls from the city auditor's office saying, where are the signatures? We need this, or else we're not going to be able to release checks for vendors and payroll. So we're sort of in a time bind of the timing that it takes us for completion of payroll to submission to downstairs for then subsequent approval. I mean, if you're saying to me as far as if the warrant subcommittee doesn't have a problem as far as coming in and doing it, we can keep it as is, but it was just brought to our attention from both accounts payable and payroll that its timing of it is tough based on the calls that they're getting from downstairs regarding being able to release checks.
I would say, as my schedule goes, I mean, sometimes I am available Tuesday. I'll get an email from Maria, around 11 o'clock stating they're ready for me to sign. I could be at a seminar and not be able to get in on Tuesday, and it's sounding like that could be a problem. So I'm not always available, even though I'm only 3 minutes from here. So I would, be acceptable to the superintendent signing off on them.
As it is done currently, it's one member of the finance committee.
Two. Deb and I are now the only two.
You've been also signing. I know one time I did it in substitution for someone.
But we hope after tomorrow night to have 3 again.
It was Bonnie, and then I took over for Bonnie.
Right.
So both of you come in on Tuesday?
When the
We just
email
wait for an
comes
email
through.
from Maria to say you need to come in, and then we try to get here as quickly as we can.
Sometimes it's Tuesday and sometimes
No,
it's
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
They do them on Tuesday.
But you
And
don't, but you don't know what time you're gonna get asked to come in, is that, yeah.
But it's 2 known Tuesdays a month? Is it
Yes.
known that it's gonna be this Tuesday and this Tuesday?
It's every other Tuesday.
Yes.
It might be 3 Tuesdays in a given month,
Sure.
depending on the month.
And when you come in and you read through it and then you sign. And then we formally sign off at the next meeting. Is it, I realize that you have a proposal, but I was wondering, was it considered that we open up the group of school committee members who could perform that function so that it's not always falling on, particularly of the last couple of cycles, it's only been the 2 of you. You both have to come in. Or am I making a mess of this?
That's a possibility. No, we were just thinking logic would have dictated that with the fact that we have a budget subcommittee, that they would be the ones, but,
Right, and
it could
I
be,
think
yeah.
that did make sense. I'm just trying to
But
figure
we
out
have to- if there are other members of the committee that would be available.
I mean, I'm
to
also
come in.
close enough by that I I have some of the same challenges you have, but if I knew that it was gonna be this Tuesday and this Tuesday, I could kind of, you know, you need it sometime between the email and the end of the business day.
Sure.
And it involves coming in and reading through and signing.
Correct.
Well, again, I don't want to, you know, I bet you the proposal makes sense, but if it's helpful, certainly until we get a third member, and then even after that, I would be happy to add myself as a fourth member, just because of the proximity. I do know that, you know, there'll probably be some times when I might not be available, but, you know, whatever. I was just trying to see if there was a housekeeping way to take care of it without a formal legal change.
I just have to throw out there, being fairly new to the signing process, it strikes me, it's a little bit of an odd situation because you're essentially approving all these pages and you don't really know. I mean, there's pages and pages and pages of names of checks going out to all these people of varying amounts. I mean, I've sat with Maria for a minute and said, gee, could you explain to me why we have all of these checks, you know, in some general terms, to try to not burden her with having to look everything up and explain every single check to me. But if I see a large sums of money or many times the name appearing many times, whatever, something, I ask questions. But it does seem a little bit unsettling, sort of, to be responsible and signing off on this when you don't really know what all these checks are for, or who they're going to, or why. So, and I could see some benefit to, I've learned a few things just from doing it a few times, you know, to say, oh, okay, these are referees and umpire fees. You know, to say, okay, every time I see this $77, I know what that is. You know, so there's some benefit to being a little bit familiar with what you're looking at. But that being said, too, I could also see where Nancy would have expertise far greater than someone like myself going in and looking at them each time to be sure they're accurate. So I'm just saying that it might make sense to think about it in terms of the value that's actually being added in terms of the authorization or approval. I mean, there may be some benefit to having someone such as Nancy have that authority rather than us, just because she'd be more knowledgeable about what she's actually signing off on each time.
And there's no glitch, just to be sure about this small point. I'm assuming that at least one of those checks is for Nancy, and there's no glitch with Nancy approving a check for herself, right? Typically that's okay?
I mean, it happens, you know, all the time as far as the warrants for, you know, signing off. She signs off on a payroll warrant.
Right. Again, I'm just trying to make sure that
It's an administrative or
Right.
ministerial duty, and so
Right.
it's allowed. But you can't, the school committee can't give up its authority on the warrant. All you're saying is, in the interim, between our votes, you're letting someone else sign the document.
Okay.
You can't give away that authority
Right.
entirely. And to be quite honest, the further away you get from the money, the less you know about what's happening. And so the idea that you're not going to examine at least the last page that shows the accounts that are being hit is not, I don't think, in the best interest of the school committee in the long run. You'd be better off to learn how to read these reports and understand what's being expended and why, than to dismiss it as being too busy, too much to look at. And there are ways there are ways to better understand what you're looking at, and people who know this stuff could tell you what those ways are. It's not hard. You know, if you understand the account structure that is used in the school department, you go to the last page of the warrant and you can see what accounts are being hit.
Right.
There might be 50 checks going
Right.
to one account. You can see what accounts are being hit. And all you need is someone to show you that.
So I would say, if I may, one of two things. One, I have no problem doing that for anyone that comes in to sign it. And by no means is our recommendation, I would say, looking to remove you one step away from the approval so that you have that intimate knowledge, or as intimate a knowledge as a committee can have regarding the inner workings of the finances. We're bringing it to you because we're getting, I don't say pressure might be too harsh a word, but between getting the stuff down for downstairs to do what they need to do in time for them to process the checks for payroll, accounts payable, doing the wire transfer, direct deposits, so on and so forth. That's where this is coming from.
Right, I think I understand that. I
I do not,
also
too, thank
can
you.
add my name to the Tuesday list, because when I did come in, I found it rather interesting, strangely enough. And so I am nearby and can be added to the Tuesday club. But I think it would mean just a little, letting Marie know or something. We'd have to
Sure.
work this out.
Mhm.
But it seems like that if between 4 of us,
And potentially 5 after tomorrow night.
that we ought to be able to come up with a more accommodating.
Well, then I would recommend that you amend the motion to list
Well, we don't
those
have
in-
a motion yet.
Well,
I
then
don't
I
think.
would recommend a motion then to list those that are available as possible signatories once warrant is available to come in and sign.
Certainly.
Speaking only of the warrants, not the payroll, is there anything in there that cannot be emailed? As far as reviewing the list?
I had asked Maria that, because I was wondering if she could scan it and send it to us, and then I could sign off and send it back to her, and she had said no.
Yeah,
So
we need
you need an
we need
actual
hard
signature.
signature, not
Okay. Can I just ask, only for clarification, is it the timing that Debbie and I are getting here? Because
It
like
has
she.
nothing, no, it's the timing between completion upstairs and for downstairs to do, you have been more than accommodating. We're not here complaining. We're here just trying to meet the schedules that for downstairs for cutting of checks, wire transfers, and processing what they need to do downstairs.
So really, Superintendent Folensby can't sign it any quicker than we can.
The issue is that she's on site more
Right.
likely, to do so.
And I can't sign it because I ultimately have to
That's
sign
correct.
the
Anyway,
document
yeah.
in order to get the process finished.
That's correct.
And so my signature wouldn't be acceptable as a member of the school committee because I'm signing the warrant at the end.
That's why I just don't know if adding 3 more people to this group is gonna solve the issue.
No, I mean, it
Timing
sounds
will
like.
solve the issue.
Yeah.
But, and that's what I'm trying to
Well,
figure out. I
we
mean,
cut
I
off- we
came
cut
at
off our
1.
warrant activity on a Thursday. And we're not here on Friday.
Right.
And I know the school isn't either. And that gives us time on Monday and Tuesday to be able to get the work
But
done.
what
But
if-
we don't have the same, to be quite fair to the school department, we don't have the same issue. Because we don't have a multiple member body that has to sign the warrant. They have a staff, me, and so I'm there, and so it's not the same kind of a problem. But the only way I think to fix the issue to make it less dependent upon Tuesday at 11 or whatever would be to stop the entry process sooner than we do. We enter right up until you get the email, if I understand it correctly, to get everything current and make sure that everything is accurate. And then it's like, okay, we're ready, you can come sign. If the process were to have ended sooner, you would have had a couple of days to come in to sign. But I don't know that can be worked out.
Potentially, I would recommend, and we can look at, we're talking a paradigm shift of things like the hourly pay, because we'll end up, we try and get the way the pay cycles work, with the subs that work on Friday, ultimately Monday, we'll get all the sub lists, from each school
right, so you
for
can't have it
processing into on Mondays and Tuesdays for the payroll, using that as an example. And then just accounts payable, we just want to get everything in as far as, even though I would say the city of East Hampton and the schools are very efficient, my standard, I say line is, if you're dealing with a municipality as a vendor, expect payment between 30 and 45 days after submission of invoice, and East Hampton regularly beats that.
Yeah.
Being a vendor myself, one as, so, but the thing is, it's sort of like surfing, you catch the wave as far as submission of the invoice with all the proper documentation to show that goods have been received, services are rendered, and then, you'll get it on the next warrant cycle. So the paradigm shift could potentially occur to change the cycle. I would recommend we can explore that over the summer for subsequent year, but this was just sort of now mid-year to do so. Would be, I'd say, to maybe look at expanding the number of people available readily available on a Tuesday once you get the email to come in for processing and submission.
Well, I would add my name to the list, but given I don't work in town, it would be very difficult. Sorry.
A little bit of a hike.
Yeah, what's a quick drive down 91?
Well, we
Yeah.
have no, we need a, we have no motion on the table. So, if I hear no motion, then I assume we will keep the process as it is. Do I hear any motion?
But is
that
that
could I-
okay? I'm just still confused.
I mean, I would
and
recommend a
having-
motion of adding Peter Gunn and,
Well, I actually don't know that you think we need, I don't know that we need we've never had specific names in the motion as to who would come.
well,
in,
then
but
a
if it would
motion
make-
to any school committee member available for signature of warrants.
Your previous motion was for
Budget
Finance committee,
Subcommittee.
subcommittee.
So you would need to extend it to the full.
All right,
Correct.
then
So
do
I would
I hear a
move that,
motion?
I would move that the school committee adopt a policy where any two members of the school committee are authorized to sign the warrant in the interim until the school committee can take full action.
Do I hear a second? There is a second. Any further discussion?
Just one. So 2 people have to sign it?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion that any member of the school committee can sign the warrants, sign off on the payroll before we sign the warrants, correct?
Sign the warrant put interim signatures on the warrant.
Warrant.
For processing.
Process. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Then I will give my email to who? Maria. You'll give it to Maria?
Have Maria email me.
And Peter. And just on that note.
All of us will be flooding in here on.
On that note, might I suggest that we ask the superintendent to explore providing some insight into the accounting system in the school department, so that there's an understanding of how the departments are structured? And that will be very helpful when you look at the summary on the warrant, to understand where the money's being spent. There's not a lot of descriptive information in the warrants, but there is a lot of information available about the accounting structure, and there's been changes in order to be able to look at the spending not only from a district level, but from an individual building level. And so there's a lot of detail that can be gotten just from the summary, if you understand what you're looking at. And there's not been an effort to educate the school committee members, and so maybe it's time that a summary chart of accounts is created that gives you the definition of the departments. I mean, there's more detail, I think, than most school committee members need in the structure of the chart of accounts. And I wouldn't suggest that you try to get versed on that, because this is a very complicated structure.
Well, Andy did a marvelous job with the revised work on the budget process and presentation in our last 2 cycles.
Yes.
I found that the latest versions of the way the documents were presented was much better, and you know, I think there's still some more room to grow there too, but.
I will say, I will offer, I mean, when we've had new administrators, we've given them everything you want to know about the budget, but we're afraid to ask. I'd be more than willing to do that with the superintendent, and, you know, we could do a little dog and pony show as far as how it is that it's structured and what it means, on what I would say is a level that would give you the comfort of understanding what it is that you're looking at.
Is that something we would like?
And I guess I just wanted to add, I feel very grateful for all that you put together for this budget book. It's been immensely helpful, I think, the way you've outlined everything, explained everything, the accounts, the summary by department, all that sort of thing has been very helpful, and I feel vastly more knowledgeable, thanks to all of your hard work in this effort. But I just wanted to throw out with this whole warrant thing, the one thing that I just felt a little uncomfortable with was just looking at the checks and all of the names of who they're going to and the amounts, regardless of kind of what account they're coming from or what department they're coming from. It's more about, you know, well, who are these people and why are they getting our money? That's kind of more the question that I had looking at this, thinking if I'm signing off on this, I sure want to be sure it's all legitimate. And so that was kind of more where my initial uncomfortableness came, and I didn't want to just burden Maria with endless numbers of questions, but really wanted to feel as though I had some handle on what I was actually signing. So I don't know if that helps to clarify what I was
Sure.
saying is
Go ahead.
kind of the educational piece that I felt like I needed help with.
Well, perhaps, Nancy, you can put accounting structure on
On our next agenda.
one of our agendas.
One of our agendas. We'd be happy to do that.
Not tonight.
No? All right.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
Okay, Nancy, you're still on.
I am. Actually, I think you all are all on. Schedule superintendent evaluation and contract renewal work session.
Oh, that's right, we have to come up with a date.
Now, is this for the year-end
Yes.
review?
Year-end
Yes.
review. Mm-hmm.
This is in June, then? Is that what we're
Yes.
looking at?
Mm-hmm.
I have to rely on Sue. You gave me a few dates of times when things have to be in. Can you remind me of those, Sue? Oh, sorry, dear.
Well. Before the end of June.
Before
Right,
the
by
end
June,
of
by
June.
the last day of June. That's what I remember last year was that we need to have completed the process of submitting our individual
Right.
evaluation forms
Before the end of June.
before the end of June.
And it really has to be, the individual reports have to be submitted so that the chairperson can write the final report in the new evaluation.
And share it at a public meeting.
At a public meeting. So all of that has to be done before the end of June.
Yes, that's right. That's what I remember. is
Yeah.
that then I, but now you, aggregate the
I
information.
thought that was good of you to remind me of that.
So the okay.
All right, so it seems to me logically that we should start on this at the beginning of June. We cannot, if it,
You only have one meeting in June.
Right, it's
What
here.
is the meeting date in June?
the meeting date
18th.
in June is the 18th.
Is that what it says?
Yes.
That's what I have in mind. I think that, based on my experience last year, Nancy,
Yes,
that
start earlier,
I'd get rolling in the first meeting in May,
May.
just 'cause.
Well, here's a little glitch in this. With the educator evaluation system, I have to have all of the administrators' summatives to me before I can give my summative to you. And they probably won't have them to me. We set the end of May for that.
Oh.
So,
But don't you think, Nancy, that we can, Superintendent, follows me, Nancy, that we could do some of our work in educator evaluation system
I could.
in advance of getting your document? Well, yeah, I remember from
I
last.
think what you could do, you certainly could have a meeting to look at the form, the structure, what you're going to request from me. We could work together on, how I would provide you with the information that you need. We could determine that certainly in May. I could get that to you then probably the first week in June.
I think that would be helpful for you.
and then we would have to have
Nancy,
it,
yeah.
and have to have a date set for individual reports to be
To you.
submitted. So, what's our meeting date at the last of May?
May 14th and May 28th.
May 28th? Can we start to speak to the issue on May 28th?
We could do a separate meeting for that as well.
Right.
A
I'm
work
wondering
session.
about
Yeah,
the
a
end of
work
that
session.
week. What about a work session later in that week? 28th, 29th is Wednesday,
30th is a
31st? Sorry, 31st gets into weekend. The 30th? I don't know. I mean, it's a tough time for me just because we're finishing up school then, but, I think that might help everybody with the timing of it, don't you think?
A work session in like May 30th, is that a Thursday?
It is a Thursday.
Yeah.
How does that look to your calendars?
Works for me.
What time do we do work sessions?
Whatever time you have.
What time would you all like? 6?
7?
7?
Split the difference with you. How about
6:30?
6:30?
6:30?
6:30? Feeling good?
May 30th?
May 30th? I have this strange feeling something happens on May 30th.
I don't have it in.
Final exams.
I don't have it in here.
I don't have my calendar.
Right.
Work session, all right. And from that date, we will then pick the June dates.
Right, because you're gonna want time
To put
to
them
get this
together.
in, and then we need to sit down
And have-
and discuss the contract renewal work session,
Yes,
which is a related but separate piece of paperwork,
right.
right? And it usually involves at least one conversation with the superintendent.
All right, then bring your calendars on the 30th. And hopefully,
I still keep thinking that May is so far away, but it's not, is it?
Coming quickly.
Could I suggest,
right.
could we go with 6 instead of 6:30?
you like 6?
Can
I
we
didn't
do
think
that?
you liked 6.
Can you get here by
Thursdays
6?
is best. Thursdays 6 is
All
good,
right, I'm
not
good with
Can you get
Tuesdays.
here by 6?
I can get in at 6.
Yeah, you
6?
sure? Okay.
Okay, I can do 6.
Thank you.
I don't hold you later at the bank on Thursdays because the
All
rest of
right.
the bank's up and
I
running later.
believe that we
My
now
last.
have
One more item. on my
PE.
list. Right, so, the school committee had asked me to look into the requirements for physical education for East Hampton High School athletes. We had talked about a possible waiver, so I had a chance after that meeting to look at the state laws and an advisory from the former Commissioner Driscoll. So on one side, you have the state law, and I've highlighted as Chapter 71, Section 3. Highlighted the first statement, which says physical education shall be taught as a required subject in all grades for all students in the public schools for the purpose of promoting the physical well-being of such students. And then Commissioner Driscoll in April of 2000 wrote a memo to clarify questions that school officials were having about the Massachusetts law on physical education. It pretty much talks about how it's a required program and part of the instructional hours of structured learning time for every secondary school student. And in the paragraph where I've highlighted, I thought that perhaps these sentences were pertinent. Both physical education and health education classes are considered to be part of this structured learning time. Students practice time in a sport, whether it is a school-sponsored, intramural, extracurricular, or in private lessons, is not considered structured learning time for purposes of the regulations. So it appears pretty clear to me that waivers for PE classes are not acceptable under the Massachusetts state laws.
I have a question and a comment, if I may.
You may.
What's the currently in the high school, when, with the block schedule, when are the physical education classes taken throughout the year? So Bailey, your senior year, when does physical education happen in your structured learning world? Is it every day of every week? Is it some days of every week? Is it?
Yes, it all depends on your schedule. You can have it every day for one semester.
Okay.
Or like I'm on a schedule where I switch off 2 classes every other day. So I'm taking gym currently for a full year, but it's every other day.
Every other day.
Yes.
But a student could. See this, so here's the comment part, to the extent that, and I think that's true, with the block schedule, there's some kids who take it for part of the year and then don't take it for the rest of the year.
Yes.
So we're assuming that the benefits of physical education continue to happen to the student in January, February, and March, even though they've stopped taking the class. To me, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, my comment is that on the face of it, this is, for lack of a more elegant term, a dopey policy interpretation. The idea that a kid who's playing in a school-sanctioned athletic team, like the baseball team or the cross-country team or the basketball team or anything like that, is not involved in structured learning time, but that a kid who hasn't had gym for 3 months somehow is still, because he had it 3 months ago.
Well,
So
Peter, if you look
yeah.
at the second paragraph, I mean, the last sentence says the change, because there was a law that mandated minimum annual hours of instruction for physical education.
Right.
That was changed, and the last sentence says the change that resulted from the repeal of the regulations is that School officials have the authority to determine the hours of instruction for physical education as they do for all other subjects of instruction. So that's the.
I know, but you know
they
what I
don't
mean.
they don't have the,
You don't
by
have flex-
law, you cannot substitute.
Eliminate.
You
cannot
can't substitute,
eliminate.
but you can monkey around with the hours all you want.
Well, may I?
You may.
All this says to me is that if we don't require PE because you're an athlete, we have to make sure you take another subject. You still have 990 hours of structured learning time.
But I think it says that this has to be part of this structured learning time. Both physical education and health education classes are considered to be part of this structured learning time. And I think that, you know, and clearly what the rest of the advisory talks about is how important that is as part of the curriculum in a school, and in a high school in particular.
Well, I'm not
but it says
disagreeing with the
classes
way
are
you
part-
might be interpreting the policy statement, but there's really only one way to interpret the law,
But
which is a hard thing for me to ever say.
But it says that classes are a part of structured learning time and sports aren't, is what it says. It's exactly what it says.
What says that?
This paragraph that's highlighted.
Are you saying the law or
says
the
PE
policy statement?
Well, that's not a law, it's something
Well,
off
the
a
law is
website.
on
I
the
don't know
other
what the law
side.
is.
The law's
The
on the
law's
other
on the
side.
other side. You can talk policy all you want, but you still have to look at the law.
It was guidance. Commissioner Driscoll's memo was guidance. This is the law on the other side. Chapter 71, Section 3.
They don't have access to.
So PE shall be taught as a required
They go to
subject
the
in all
gym.
grades for all students.
That's what they do. They go down to the gym.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that you can't, I still don't get it. I don't understand why you can't,
You know, when my son switched over, he wasn't allowed.
well, you
always-
can't
I don't
teach
remember what it was.
PE
He wasn't allowed to
in
use it
sports,
before and after school. That's what
except that it doesn't count as the 990 hours.
That's right. But I think
Well,
what the
Fine,
interpretation
so
is
the
that
children have to take a different course.
it needs to be part of the 990 hours.
Well, the very interesting thing is, I did a little research myself too, and in the state of Massachusetts, the movement has been for the last 2 years to add more PE
Right.
to the schedule.
Right.
And there have been about 3 or 4 laws put before the state legislature proposing extending the school day so that you'll have more hours in PE. There is no movement in what we're
That's
asking
another
to do.
unfunded mandate, right? Because demand that
Well-
we pay people to supervise the kids for a longer period of time, or teach,
No,
or whatever
no,
we're.
that's not what they're proposing. But I just think that there isn't there's not much wiggle room here for us with the law.
Was the question asked directly with the Department of Secondary, Mitchell Chester's office?
I mean, this was Commissioner Driscoll. Well, I mean, the law is the law. You know, you can get an advisory, you know, from Commissioner Mitchell. However, I think there's a bigger question here, and I think Deb Lusnia did have a conversation with Brian Miller, one of our physical education teachers, and I think there's some philosophical reasons that we would want to have physical education classes for all students in our schools. And before the school committee was to try to look into changing that, then I would recommend that we hear from our physical education teachers at our high school as to why they believe that it's an important part of the curriculum.
And I think it would also be instructive to hear from the students. I'd be curious whether that sample of folks who were talking to me that day, I think Bailey, you might have even been in the classroom, they might be the only 3 kids in the whole building who feel the way they do about wanting to take an academic class to help improve their chances of college admission, since they're already doing something that to me struck me as a structured athletic activity. And that's why I found their argument appealing. I'd already heard Deb Lusnia's argument, and I think it would be, you know, I just think it's a neat idea.
Here's what I would suggest. I mean, I would really recommend that we bring the physical education teachers to the school committee to talk about it. Because as I say, for a lot of the pieces that we put into our curriculum, you know, there are reasons that we make choices about what we have in our curriculum and what we don't have. So as well as students. We could get some feedback from students if you'd like to do that. But before we make any decisions, you know, about any of this, then I would write to Mitchell Chester and get his advice on this. I mean, I can do that as a first step, but I think it's important for us to listen to our physical education teachers and how they see physical education as an important part of our curriculum. Because I think our administrators believe that it has a place in our curriculum as well.
I don't think anyone's saying get rid of physical education. I think you're pushing that way too far.
No, I'm not saying that, Mike, but what I thought I was hearing is that some students could get a waiver from our physical education classes. So that's what I would like our physical education teachers to talk about, is the advisability in their eyes of allowing that, and our administrators as well. I think it's just part of collecting information on a subject that, you know, you have asked for more information on.
Yeah.
So I brought this to you, and it sounds like you want more information. So it seems to me that that would be a good next step.
Yeah, I agree. We need to find out if getting a waiver is even possible before we have them go through the whole presentation. Because if it's not, then they don't need to do the presentation.
Well, in the spirit of some of the observations that were made earlier this morning, I'd even suggest that we could start at something more basic, which is to ask interested students and their families if they want to initiate some of this research and some of the questions. And if they find, because I mean, who, you know, in some ways, who better to make the request for a waiver than the folks who see some wisdom in it.
Peter, I think before we go through all of that, then I should get in touch with Mitchell Chester and get his advisory on.
Well, that's what I meant, was that they could write a letter. You know, we're looking at a document that's 13 years old. They could write a letter saying, hey, we read this. A, we're interested in the idea, just as a possibility. B, our superintendent got great information for us. C, we're wondering if we're understanding it correctly, and has there been any change? If the answer D is yes, yes, no, then it stops right there. You don't have to have the physical ed folks come in and talk to us. Nothing else, right?
So I think it's a school committee decision as to how you want me to proceed with this.
Well, I think that is the, it seems to be what's on the table. So what I am hearing, and I don't know whether it's just who speaks the loudest, but are you interested as a committee in pursuing the idea of waivers to PE for high school athletes?
Yes,
You are interested.
I'm interested.
Who else is interested?
I'm interested in.
You're interested.
I'm not sure waiver is the right word, but whatever it is, yes.
Well, having them be exempt from high school PE while they're while they're high school athletes. I don't know what that is a waiver.
Whatever the right wording is,
Yeah.
yes.
To some degree, maybe not exempt from all PE requirements, but maybe just half or some. At least, is there a choice in their schedule?
And understanding that they would still need 990 hours of instruction or whatever, however
Structured
it's
learning
phrased.
time.
Structured learning. I mean, because we hear stories about other districts having study halls, which we all know is illegal. Apparently not, but.
So that
All right,
990 hours, what does that cover? Does that cover all 4 years of high school?
It's each year, I think.
Each year.
1 year of high
Well,
school?
then I think, to me, Superintendent Nancy, I think it appears that if there is enough voiced interest in this, that it would be good to get an advisory statement from Mitchell Chester, and see exactly how he interprets the law.
Is that what the
And
school
I'll
committee
go
wishes?
toe to toe with him. I mean,
Is that what the school committee wishes me to do then?
is that what your committee wishes?
Yes,
I'll seek an advisory from Mitchell Chester.
Let's hear a motion.
I move that we inquire about the current status of this document. This is,
The current status of the law. We're not gonna,
okay. Oh, I'll defer to someone else to make
I
the
mean,
motion.
you want the policy change?
No, I don't. I guess what I'm simply trying to figure out is there any you know,
Could I frame it, Peter? I think what I would ask the commissioner is for an interpretation of the law. And does it allow for waivers for student athletes
That's pretty clear.
as part of it, to replace a physical education requirement?
I move that we
Does that make sense?
have the superintendent get that information.
And I think using the word waiver is going to get a no.
So would
Because
you-
I think I think you're looking at it a little differently than I am.
So what would your language
Well-
be to the commissioner?
I would ask, since we have the flexibility to determine what the structured time is, do we have to require students to take a complete semester of PE in a structured classroom? I mean, it seems as though that document you gave us says that the school administration has the authority to determine how many hours this entails in a year.
I think
as
that-
long as you meet the 990 number.
I think those are two separate issues, though, because you're saying, does a student have to take a full semester? I think what I'm hearing is, can a student substitute his student athletics as part of his physical education
Well, and if you
requirement
ask
of
that
the
question,
90?
I think you're going to get a no.
Okay, so the Mass Corps has a PE requirement.
Yes.
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 Okay, for the number of credits.
Yes.
Yes.
So the question would be, well, I'm thinking, can a school sport be substituted for that?
For one of those,
For
for the
that
PE.
credit?
Oh, Pierre, where that voice
Peter
is
at
coming
home.
Isn't, oh, that's Peter. So is that what anybody else is thinking? I mean, that's what I imagined as the waiver being.
Well, I thought that is what started the whole discussion,
Yeah.
was that the proposal was that student athletes be allowed to not take the scheduled PE class while they were participating in a student athletic team or student athletics.
Correct. Because that opened up a block to take
Something else.
something else.
Some of the course.
So that was your
So when
original
you're-
question, Deb.
Yes.
So can
When
you-
you're on the basketball team, during the basketball season, you don't take PE.
But
When
you
you're
would take
on
it.
You can if you want to, but
But
that you're
you
not
can be
required.
exempt from it.
Right, you could be exempt.
And if you're on the football team, you don't take during football season.
You could be exempt.
Or if you're
You could
on
be
the
exempt.
badminton team, you don't take PE during the badminton. Do we have a badminton team?
I don't think so.
Okay, what,
Essentially with
Baseball.
that,
baseball?
That sport
We have a
is your
badminton team?
credit, right?
right, would be your credit.
Team, but you just need to be aware that your seasons don't correspond with.
Oh,
your
I know.
semesters.
Don't fit the,
Well, they would satisfy the PE requirement.
Right,
Yeah.
it's satisfying a PE requirement.
Not
Exactly.
a Bailey, you wanna weigh in on this?
I have a question. Would this athletics, would it include cheerleading, or is that not
famous
considered
question.
a sport? Because I know that freshman year, we did still have to pay the athletic fee twice because we were competing in each season. Technically speaking, we were competing in winter and spring.
I think all that would probably have to be evaluated, you know, all the different sports and potential things that could be considered eligible for a waiver would probably have to be studied and evaluated.
So that would be the second step, but so let me just clarify, make sure I have this correct. So what you want me to ask is if a student is on a high school athletic team, would that student not be required to take the PE requirement that year?
I would substitute and say, can that team sport satisfy the requirement of a PE credit?
And we also talked about it potentially, possibly, allowing for someone who pursues some sort of athletic training, athletic thing outside of the parameters of school to also potentially be reviewed for eligibility as well.
Do you want me to ask that as well?
Yeah, just to expand it so it's not just
team sport.
a team sport at the high school.
So do you want frame that again, Deb? Because I was just writing the first part.
Or some other extracurricular athletic program.
You're talking about something outside of the school day?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Which is fair, considering team sports take place outside of the school day.
Get a
All right.
advisory from the commissioner.
Okay. Did, we really didn't ever put it in form of motion, but I think we're clear on it.
Right? Does it have to be a motion? Or
No, I didn't
can you
think
just,
so.
You can just ask me, right?
I'll just ask you. All right.
While we're asking for things, could I ask for
Wait,
one?
if it's on the agenda.
It's not
It's not on the agenda. Let's see when we will put it on the agenda.
Oh, okay.
What would you like on next meeting's agenda?
I was just wondering if we could put on some future agenda discussion about, we've brought this up many different times over
Okay.
time. The topic of where our graduates end up going to college, the fact that community members have commented that they've often noticed, and we've commented in some discussions as a group, in the outreach committee that's working on promoting positive images of our district and all, there's been discussion about the fact that it seems as though the colleges that our graduates go to aren't quite as diverse geographically as many of the other school districts in our area, and people create assumptions about us based on that information. And it seems as though the schools in general seem to be more based in our area, or not as diverse in terms of the variety of colleges and universities that are attended by kids in other districts. And so what I wanted to know is, could we look into that, and could we
All right, let's get the topic here. Is the topic colleges our East Hampton students attend?
correct, yes.
And how is it that you would like us to, like the superintendent to look into this for us? I mean, or talk to us about this, or have this on the agenda?
Well, I know that you've talked about that before, right, Nancy? As
Yeah, we
something
had that, right, didn't
that
we?
you were interested in, particularly after the Gazette coverage, right?
Yeah.
Remember the Gazette article? And we all have that. So, I mean, I share the same interest in just in terms of maybe getting some sort of report that could then be a basis of some conversation, looking at the college and career, because they're both part of
What
it.
we could do, and we certainly can get a history of colleges that our students have been accepted to and colleges that they've attended.
Mm-hmm. And colleges
And
they apply
we
to.
add one more piece, which is the colleges that they're being encouraged to apply to.
Right. And I wonder, like, the guidance department might have some insight on that whole topic.
Yeah,
Well,
that's-
they did
that's
come
who I-
one time
yeah,
and
they
speak
did.
on that.
I bring
Yeah.
them back.
Yeah, they
to
came
talk
back
about
once,
that,
yeah.
and I don't know, to maybe just look into it and give it some thought, and maybe it has to do with the relationships that they have that are particularly strong with certain area colleges versus, you know,
Let's
whatever.
let them come in and give a presentation on that.
Okay, colleges we apply to, colleges we get accepted to, and colleges we go to.
Right,
Or
and colleges the students are encouraged to apply to.
All right,
That'd be great,
we've
thank
got
you.
several meetings coming up. Anything else to put on the?
Actually.
One more?
The budgetary plan going forward for funding AP. I didn't want to bring it up tonight and delay our lengthy discussion, but the MIMSI grant has helped with that, and the MIMSI grant money is going away, and yet it's become a very successful thing. So what are the sort of implications from your perspective, Nancy, about how we can keep that part of our plan, or
Future funding
or
for
not?
AP.
Yet, what's the plan now? Since so much of the growth occurred during a period when we had an outside source of funding, what's the, you know, and Shirley or you could speak to that, it would be great, just to get sort of an update, because we're kind of we're moving into a new phase of where do we go with that? And that's also, I think, very important to that broader understanding of the quality of the school that we have.
You like that? Okay. All
Thank
right,
you.
that takes us through July. Now, matters for action.
Motion to approve the minutes of the March 12th, 2013 school committee meeting.
Second.
All those in favor, any discussion? All those in favor of accepting the minutes as presented?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstention? They are approved as presented.
All right, we'll go to payroll then. Move to approve the school payroll dated March 21st, 2013 in the amount of $449,392.14.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the school payroll dated March 21st, 2013 in the amount of $449,392.14. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Move to approve the accounts payable authorization for payment dated March 21st, 2013 in the amount of $248,592.44, and it was pre-approved by 2 finance subcommittee members.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the accounts payable authorization for payment dated March 21st, 2013 in the amount of $248,592.42. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The accounts will be paid. And I believe there is one last thing on our matters for action, and that is,
Where does the money go?
hold on, wait, I haven't gotten to it yet.
Surplus items.
The surplus items.
So are we
So, what is it that we need to do on this? We need to approve these, we need to approve, wherever that list is, we need to approve
Right
the
here.
items that are on the surplus, that have been listed as surplus. And as I understand it, others, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong,
Mike's a good authority on this.
that other city groups or people or departments have already had their pick?
I believe so. I mean, I provided this list to the 2 departments that I think might be interested in some of what I saw on here. But the superintendent made the building available to staff a couple of days, I think, with the
Yeah.
maintenance director. And I think every department that may have had a need for furniture or equipment or tools or whatever's available had a chance to go through. I think most of the items got tagged, or if they didn't, they were somehow identified as being of interest to others. I think this came out of a email exchange that we had regarding a local business wanting a part of the gym floor. And the inability for the city to be able to effectively do a surplus disposal, because we're only gonna have control of the school for about 2 weeks. So the school committee controls the building while it's being used as a school. And I think we'll need to add to this motion, as long as it's in front of us tonight. At some point, there's a formal recognition that the school no longer is in charge of the building and it falls to the city. And then the city, under its contract, will have the building destroyed. So the city will have control of the building from probably the 22nd to the 30th of April. And it won't be enough time for us to be able to dispose of things, because I would have to go to the city council with the same sort of action that's happening tonight here. So I advised the principal at the high school in the emails that there's a disposal process. The school committee gets a list of what's being disposed. They approve the surplus disposal, and that disposal has to be held at a public sale. It can be one of 2 ways. We generally do sealed bids, but generally speaking, the city has a list. We can say, I've got, one of these 5 of those. I have a list of 12 items. We know what they are. We've set them aside. In this case, there's a lot of stuff in the building that isn't moving, that isn't being taken. There is no need to declare surplus if it's staying within a government entity. So the stuff that's going from the school department to other schools is still school property. The stuff that's going from the school to the city is still city property, so it doesn't need any formal action beyond the administration. But if it's leaving to go to private hands, it has to be done in an open, public way. It looks like the proposal here is to talk about an auction, and so we'll talk more. But I think that the details of this have to be incorporated in the motion, and if you reference the list of materials in this memo dated the 21st, it's probably sufficient.
And it seems clear then that this is, the things listed in this memo of the 21st are ready to be released to the public through some
They will
means.
be. I think
I
when
mean,
the
they will
school,
be.
when
Yeah.
the school's done using them, they will be.
Yeah.
Like some of this stuff has been abandoned already. The lathes in the wood shop haven't been used in a long time and that sort of thing. There still needs to be an advertisement that
Right.
someone has to do, the school department's gonna have to do in the newspaper. There'll have to be a date and time certain for the auction. And I'm sure that'll be fun for somebody to pull off.
So I think that,
Andy's investigating that.
I guess it makes sense right this moment until we release these as surplus. All of this belongs to the school.
Yeah, and that's what I suggested, is the easiest thing to do is for the school department to declare it surplus. That way, when you release the building to the city,
Right.
that stuff has already been surplused. It's not really something that's being turned over for
Right,
the city to
right.
worry about.
So we don't need to go in and each of us pick out a trophy.
I kind of found it interesting that trophies were being auctioned, but.
I have
What?
a question.
Well, so can I ask that, Mike? Because, there are people who are interested in trophies, people from the community. I mean, are we able to just give them those, or do
No.
they have to be,
It's
that's what I
public
thought.
property. You can't give any of it to
Has to be
anybody.
auctioned,
You can't,
right?
we
So
can't give
that-
it to the superintendent.
Right, so they would be part of this auction then?
Yeah.
Everything
Who gets
that
the
that
money
we're
from
gonna
the
dispose of. Now,
Well,
you
that's
may only
my
have one
opening
bidder.
question. Who gets?
Right.
We raised 300,000.
Right, so Mike, can you clarify where any revenue that comes out, let's say $500 is raised in this auction,
I would ask Andy to verify, but I think general fund.
of the city, general fund of the city?
I believe so, yeah.
Right.
Okay, I have a question. Is there a chance that this auction with the advertisement and the auctioneer person, would all of that cost more than what we might get from this?
You don't need I did verify that you don't need a licensed auctioneer, and to be honest, the police chief holds our bike auctions, so. So there won't be an auctioneer cost. There is a chance that the
I was so hoping
advertising
to get to be the
will
auction.
cost, well, I think whatever you spend is gonna be money you're not gonna get back, because I don't think you can keep the money. I think it has to be turned over as a general fund receipt.
But the
So
expense
whatever you
for
spend-
the
The
auction
expense
comes
does
out
come out of our budget, right?
Right.
Well, what Andy found out is, go ahead.
Some auctioneers might take a percent
Of the
what
sale,
is-
right.
what is-
Right, and that's what we would look for, or,
Or find,
McMahon.
or find someone who's willing to hold the auction, and all you need is a couple of people to be able to help with that.
Yeah.
And handle the money. I mean, if I knew the dates, I would help.
so you can help me figure out the dates.
Sure.
That'd be great.
And so anyone can perform the auction. You have a date certain, you have a list of items, and how you do it in that building is kind of gonna be up to us. I mean, this stuff is gonna be scattered around the building.
Scattered around, it's gonna be a walking
So
auction.
what's
Room
gonna
to room.
happen, beginning on the 8th, is that there's a moving company coming into the school. And they're gonna begin to gather the things that the staff have determined are going to the new building, or are going to other buildings in the district, or are coming to city departments.
Right.
Although our stuff will just probably be all hauled to one place, and then we'll distribute it out. By the time they're done, which should be sometime during the week of vacation, there'll be a lot of items left in the building that are of no value to anyone in the city, that aren't gonna be reused by the school department, that aren't gonna have a home here. You're gonna see new chairs in this room, I suspect, as a result of this activity.
Right.
Those are the items that we're gonna offer I believe that we're gonna offer for public sale. The reason this is happening is because there are a few people, 3 to 5, that are really adamant about wanting certain things, and there's no way you can give it away. You just can't say, I like you, you're a nice business, I'm gonna give you what you want. It's just not possible. under the public law. And so this is a way to get around that, still offer it to people. There's some complications with the gym floor, but you know, we'll try to work through all that.
Right. We talked about that before. The gym floor's got some cutting issues, but
And the contractor, I need to run by the contractor, because the contractor, you know, essentially is got to get the building at a date certain, and so all of this has to happen by the 30th. On May 1st, we have to be out of the building. His hazardous materials abatement people come in.
Right.
Because that building has to be abated of asbestos, PCBs, any other hazardous materials before it's destroyed.
so sometime between the 15th, which is when
Sometime
the
between
city
the
will be done,
The 15th and the 30th.
30th,
this
there
all
needs
has
to be
happen.
an event that allows this to go on.
And just out of, this is curiosity, actually. The auction is held, it's over with, and some surplus nobody wanted.
The contractor is responsible for disposal of anything that's left in the building.
So then, the contractor can then take, I'll just, because I'm kind of fond of them, can then take the trophies and put them out on the street with a big sign that says free.
Sure. And any of these individuals that wanted parts of the building could have gone to the contractor. And to be quite honest, the building committee was urging that.
Yes.
You know, all of us on the building committee side were saying, talk to Fontaine. You want this, talk. But no one wanted to do that, because I think that they figured they'd have to pay Fontaine and they might get it for free.
Right,
They're not gonna necessarily be able to get it for free. They might get it for a very low bid.
Right.
You know, if you're the only bidder for the gym floor,
You got it.
you could buy the entire gym floor for a relatively small amount of money.
And then spend a fortune
You'd
getting it
have
out
a
of there.
window. You'd have a window to get it out.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing too. I think that the
But it's
date.
a nice hardwood floor.
It is. It's a nice hardwood floor. You pick a date that allows a reasonable person to get stuff out of there. You're not going to pick a date of the 29th and say, and everything needs to be cleared out of the building on the 30th, because most.
Well,
right?
exactly, and the superintendent's gonna have to decide, well, actually, this will be while we own the building. We'll jointly decide what kind of insurance someone's gonna need, if they're not just gonna physically pick the trophy up and walk out of the building. If they're bringing in a work crew in to run power equipment
Right.
in our building, they better be insured. Because we're not gonna be able to cover their insurance. And so, it's not like my brother John and I are gonna come in with our chainsaw and we're gonna chop up the floor. You know, we might use a chainsaw, but we're pretty much gonna have to have a liability policy naming the city. Or we'll have to come up with whatever that requirement is.
Now-
Because if we allow them in the building and they're not insured, we are liable for them. Which brings me to using the new building, and I wanna talk to you after the meeting about that.
Brings me to, what would happen if we don't declare this surplus?
Then it would, the only alternative for disposing of anything that we leave in the building is going to be through the general
The
contractor.
contractor just takes it.
And
Does
if the
with it what he
contractor wants to
pleases.
sell it to someone who's
Yeah.
interested, they can. If they don't want to, they won't have to. To be quite honest, I'm guessing that they're really not gonna be interested in dealing with, you know,
Right.
bits and pieces. They're just gonna say, no, the
It's a lot
place
of
is locked,
trouble.
go away.
Mhm.
So I honestly think that the school administration is attempting to assist these individuals that are interested. And I don't think it's a bad thing, but
I don't think
it's
it's
just,
a bad
it's
thing either, but
complicated.
it really is kind of a,
And it's gonna be work for a few people.
yes.
Because
and
you'll
a
have to
little
keep
money.
track of it, you know, I mean, somebody's gonna have to take the money, make
So we couldn't
change.
just leave it unlocked one night.
No.
Don't get that.
Well,
in a minute,
if your
please.
school would give us a.
Is the tape still on?
insurance-
Sorry.
If
The
your
hour's
school
late.
gives us a blanket insurance policy, so if anyone gets hurt that night, maybe we talk about it.
All right, do I hear a motion?
I have a question. I'd like to know from Ms. Superintendent Follensby if this is a good use of your time and staff time.
Well, you know, I appreciate Mike's offer to help, and we'll talk about it. And, yeah, I mean, we have had a number of people requesting things, so I just think that it's a shame if we don't allow them to have these things that they want. Some people have some real strong attachments to the trophies, you know, that kind of thing, so.
I would leave it up to your discretion how to handle this.
Now, if any of the old trophies are silver, I would definitely consider their scrap value
Yeah.
to the department before I think of selling them for $1.
I agree. So, Mike, if you're
The
willing
old, the
to
old stuff is silver. I
work
mean,
with me on this, I think we can pull it off. But, you know, one way or the other, I think if we get approval from the school committee, then we can decide, we can go forward and see what.
And there are options. Just so you know, the salt shed is not used when it's not winter. And so we have a locked storage area that has a dirt floor, but it's big enough. I mean, if there were items that we thought had value that we didn't think we could manage to do an auction with, there's no reason we couldn't move them there and then do a sealed bid or something like that. You know, and I don't know what kind of equipment is going to be left and whether any of it's of any value. But, I mean, there is value in that stuff. I mean, the old lathes are cast housings. They're cast iron housings. You know, in scrap, they're worth probably $150.
And we've had people request to take them away as scrap already.
Of course, because there's good money in iron. And the contractor, whatever we leave that's scrap, that is salvageable in a way that they can get funding from, they're gonna get their, you know, I mean, it's gonna get used. But lots of people want scrap metal.
When you pointed out that people from the city went through and looked at them, they're looking at them for city uses. It's conceivable. I looked down that tool list. I'm not a tool person, but I thought, whether scrap or otherwise, there might be some value in that. So I agree, Nancy, and I wonder about the idea even of, you know, you just store them somewhere and not try to deal with it in that 2-week window.
Well, first of all, I think we need a motion now.
Right.
We need, really need a
Yeah, I
motion.
mean, if the school committee declares the items on this list surplus.
How about making a
does,
motion?
it does allow the superintendent to do whatever.
Yeah.
I move that with the items listed on the April 21st,
March.
March 21st memo, including lathe and other items, be deemed surplus and left to the discretion of the superintendent.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion on the table, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion carries, and you are now in charge of the metal shop.
Just what you wanted.
Before
Do
we-
I
all
get-
the trophies.
whoops.
Before we adjourn, this was right here with me. This is your agenda for tomorrow evening.
I had one of these a minute ago. Did you take it?
Did you have one? Did you do?
Yeah.
I had one.
Or there's a whole pile right here. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I got one.
I have one.
I don't need another.
I'll
Thanks.
just take one. I don't know, maybe I got one.
And we're all gonna
And
come.
we're all gonna come, and I will see you then.
I want to urge my colleagues who do come, and I know that there's going to be discussion tomorrow night about this, but we're in a public session, so someone's free to say otherwise. I urge that we have the method be by secret ballot, so that all votes will count.
Well, we'll see how it goes tomorrow night. Do I hear another motion?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Now can I bang the
Bang
gavel?
it.
Oh.
Just woke
We have to get you a
I
wooden
know.
block. Maybe we'll find